All right, welcome everybody. Today I have a guest here, Sam Rosen. Sam is a friend of mine. We've known each other for a long time. I met Sam years ago. I don't know. I actually remember where we met. We were in we were at some kind of event. It was for, I think, like Effective Altruist or something. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. And we just got talking and we just clicked right away. We argued about philosophy. Then we argue about it now for years. And so Sam wanted to talk about meta ethics and moral realism in particular. So a little bit about Sam. Sam does a lot of really cool artistic stuff. This might not sound like a really cool skill, but he curates art, and the art that he puts together is awesome. And I'm not a huge like art person. I don't spend all day in art galleries, but it's actually worth it to check out his art. He's very good at it's a strange skill I don't see a lot of people appreciate, which is to have a really good aesthetic sense. So I don't know if that's a strange way to describe what I think to be what I regard as one of your like greatest talents. I think it's really cool. But is there anything else you want to add about yourself?
Yeah, I do photography. I make AI art. I freestyle rap. I throw events. And I like talking about philosophy. So those are my main things I'm into.
Yeah, and we're not going to get into this, but we've had some interesting disputes about like Newcomb's problem and other stuff like that I think would probably result in us trying to punch each other through the screen. So we'll avoid that. So instead, we're going to talk about moral realism. I do need to talk about other stuff on this channel. I'm always telling everybody, I promise I'll do another video on something other than meta ethics, and then it's another 17 videos on meta ethics. But that's
We can talk about
what
something
I
else
do, I
another
guess.
day. I think we should.
Yeah, we can. But this will be your first time on the channel, and hopefully you'll be back to talk about other stuff. And I'll get some links for you, and I'll put them in the description for the video so people can check out your stuff and see where it's at. Okay, so let's get into it. You wanted to have this discussion, so you tell me, how do you want to start this?
Sure. Okay, so what do you take the claim that moral realism is true to mean?
So I take moral realism. So there's a variety of different ways other people frame it, and usually there's like extra features or more minimal features, and so it's really this gradation of the
Yeah.
number of propositions you want to pack together into a big conjunction. So I take it to be the claim that there are stance-independent moral facts. Sometimes people want to add in other features that are sort of baked into that, or
Yeah.
are presupposed by that, or are like adjacent to it, but kind of important and interesting depending on your philosophical position. So, like for instance, a common perspective is to include cognitivism, the claim that that moral claims are propositions, they're truth.
Yeah.
They're capable of being true or false, that sort of thing. Sometimes people include an epistemic condition, so where it's not just that there are these stance-independent moral facts, but that we're capable of knowing some of them. But I just focus on that ontological claim that there are stance-independent moral facts. And just what does stance-independent mean? It means that whatever it is that makes these claims true, it's not dependent on the goals, standards, or values of any individuals or any groups. Another way to put this is that the facts in question are not constructed. They're not created by us. They're not up to us, whether it be something as a matter of individual preference or something that's put together by a group through some constructive procedure or something like that.
Yeah. And do you think morally motivational is important to your concept of moral realism, or is that sort of like a thing that you could bake in, but not that interesting?
Yeah, no. And a lot of moral realists are going to disassociate their notion of there being these stance-independent moral facts from the notion of motivation. They don't necessarily have to think that these facts are necessarily motivating. So yeah, that would be something that realists themselves would typically like. Some might think that moral facts are necessarily motivating, some might not, but that's like a sort of a auxiliary feature. It's not like part of moral realism.
Yeah. All right. So I'll sketch out basically what I think my position is, and you tell me, you pick it apart, and you tell me what's wrong with it, and we'll just go with that. So I take it that you think that hypothetical imperatives are truth apt. So if I said something like, if I want to get some ice cream, I should go to the store and like use money and pay for it and get it. Like there's facts to be known about like given some goal, the best way to achieve that goal. Do you agree with that sort of thing?
One moment, I had an issue. Shit, I'm already gonna have to edit something out of here. I have this warning saying low disk space. So
Okay.
fuck. Can you start over?
Okay, so I'm going to sketch out my position a little bit, and you can tell me if you think it is reasonable. You can pick it apart, and we can just talk about it. So I take it that you think that hypothetical imperatives are truth apt. So if I said I want some ice cream, there's like a fact to be known. Given my goal of ice cream, like the most efficient or best way to get that ice cream, like there's like facts about the universe independent of my stances that are, if I have this goal of ice cream, what would be the best way to get that ice cream? Like, you agree that that's truth apt?
So if there's a claim like, so the truth aptness would apply to the claim. So if there's a claim like there is an optimal way of obtaining ice cream,
Yes.
I would agree to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I take, when I think about moral realism, I just think, so if there's a claim like, so I think of rationality as what should I do? Given my goal, what is the optimal way of getting it? And I think of morality as what should we do? And so I think there's similar facts about, if me and you were on an island, what would be the optimal way that we could like plan and strategize and work together to achieve our like mutual goals of whatever our goals are that would like most efficiently get us off the island. And even if we have different goals, there's still facts to be known about like, okay, so you want seashells and I want lumber. And given this fact, there are facts to be known about like how we can maximally, you get lumber, I get seashells without like having to fight about it and conflict with it. Like I think there are facts about the universe about given our goals, what we could like, what would be the optimal thing for us to do if we could arrange it, if we could organize to both maximize our goals. And I take it that's like sort of a natural reading of what should we do. Like if we were on an island and I said, what should we do? I think that as a sort of a natural reading of like, oh, we should figure out the best way to get off the island, which we both have the goal of doing. And suppose you also wanted to pick flowers and get off the island. And I say, what should we do? Like, okay, you should pick some flowers and then we should build a boat and get off the island. And that seems sort of natural reading of what should we do.
Yeah. So you've presented this idea before, and I think there's some really interesting features of it. I do ultimately think it doesn't really fit with the general schema of what counts as a moral realist account. But it does propose certain sorts of considerations that are sufficiently distinct from a sort of brute or immediate or more proximal characterization of what would be in my interests. So there's these sort of institutional or collective interests, and in a certain way, my interests can be subordinated to them. And maybe the insight, and you could correct me if I'm wrong or if this isn't the right way to construe it, is that if I were a single individual going through the universe, acting on my goals and values, the kinds of considerations that you're raising would never arise because there would be no conflict with another agent with a different set of goals. But the moment I come into conflict with another agent with a different set of goals, now what's optimal for me to do relative to my goals is in a certain sense entangled with, and now in a certain like dependent in some way on the decisions that other agent would make relative to whatever their goals are. Would that be correct?
Exactly.
So you could imagine, so for at the lowest level where this never, you just have an agent that it's the only agent, and so it can never come into conflict with others. Another one might be a universe where everybody lives in their kind of own little bubble and they never come into conflict with others. And another might be, let's say I'm omnipotent, and then I run into people that have conflicting goals. I could just bulldoze them. I could ignore them. I could just snap my fingers and they disappear. And then that might be the best thing for me to do, is to just never consider any of their goals. And so in order for the concerns that you're raising to manifest, the other people would need to have goals that, I guess another example would be if everybody else has exactly the same goals as me. So I run into somebody and they're like, hey, I want to do the same thing you do. And I'm like, great, okay, let's work together. So you would have to have a conflict of goals such that like counterfactually in your absence, the things that they would do would conflict with you were you to be present or something like that. I don't know. But basically, them optimizing for their goals without regard for you would be inconsistent with you optimizing for your goals without regard for them. And so now you have a conflict of goals, and they would have to have some sort of power or leverage to cause at least some degree of interference with you, such that factoring their own goals into your own decisions would now make sense. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. What sort of motivates these considerations is just, I think of examples for me. I imagine like really intelligent beings going into portals where they're going to one-shot Prisoner's Dilemma other very intelligent beings that are also going into these portals. And all they do is they go into the portal, they meet another thing that's smart aliens going into a portal, and they one-shot Prisoner's Dilemma. Some people will want to say that the rational thing to do is defect, but there's something that seems like madness to me about the fact that, well, if they thought about, well, what should we do? what is it that we should do in this situation? Well, they would all realize that like we should cooperate. We should, and then that would be, and then there's a sort of madness to like the fact that they can't get to that equilibrium. Like there is an equilibrium where they're all better off and they just can't get to it. And that strikes me as sort of madness. And so I want to say, like, listen, there are facts to be known about how if we could arrange it the best way that we could interact with each other, even if there's no, like, even if I can't make you do it, even if there's no coercion, there is still a fact to be known about what would be the best if we could arrange it, you know?
Maybe you should unpack some of that. So your concerns here bring in like game theoretic considerations and the prisoner's dilemma. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that stuff on my channel. So maybe you should walk us through some of that and then show like what is the madness here? Because I understand this from previous discussions, but I don't know if everybody will.
Well, a prisoner's dilemma is just the idea that sometimes two people cooperating is better than two people defecting, but that if one person defects and one person cooperates, the defector wins and does better, and vice versa. So they both have an incentive to defect, but if they both defect, they're both worse off than if they both cooperate. Now, some economists want to say that in a multi-shot example, it makes sense to cooperate, but they say in a one-shot, no matter what they do, you should just defect, because no matter what they do, you should defect. And I'm saying that there's sort of a stance from which it's madness that you're stuck in this defect equilibrium where you're both worse off. And there is a fact to be known that if you had both cooperated, you would both have achieved your goals better. That is like a fact about the universe. It doesn't depend on your stances or anything like that. It's like a literal just fact about the universe.
Right. So we can imagine. So you basically have, 4 possible outcomes. If you and another person are playing a prisoner's dilemma game, it's you both defect, you both cooperate, you cooperate and they defect, or you defect and they cooperate. So there's these 4 outcomes, and your highest payoff for one instance is if you defect and they cooperate, right?
Yeah.
But if you repeated this over and over, likely the other person's going to start defecting, and then you both get defect, and you both defect. And the long-term consequence of you both defecting is that you get less total points than if you both always cooperated. Is that also correct?
Yeah.
Right. So if you were going to do this a whole bunch of times, the best strategy, I mean, ideally what you would have is you always defect and they always cooperate, like they're just a sucker forever. But when you're interacting with other people, if you do this one time, maybe they'll be a sucker. But people typically learn their lesson. And if you do this 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, they're going to start defecting. And so it's going to shift towards the optimal strategy being to stop defecting, because then you're both defecting. And it would actually be better for you to both cooperate, but you never really get to that point if you're making these like locally rational decisions. And so it's like there's a certain sense in which there's a tension between what you could say is sort of like locally optimal or rational with what would be ideally rational if you could somehow commit yourself to always cooperating. In other words, like the payout is better if we always cooperate, but you constantly have this disincentive to do so. And what you're proposing is like, there's at least a descriptive fact. If you and the other person always cooperated, you would be better off in an iterating prisoner's dilemma than if you always defected or you employed some other strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
The best strategy is to always cooperate. And yet, and by best strategy, I mean the best strategy with respect to achieving your own values.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Not like there's not this ghostly notion of there being something best independent of your values. It's actually best for you and the other person always cooperate. And yet people may not do this, and we may deem it rational for them to not do it. And there's something weird about that. And you're proposing that there's at least this fact, things would be better if we all cooperate, something like that.
Yeah. We should cooperate. I just think it's true. We should cooperate in prisoner's dilemma. Whether I should cooperate, that's what's one question. But whether we should cooperate, I just think it's just straightforwardly true. I think it's a straightforward reading of what we means here. We should cooperate. Like both of us achieve our goals better if we cooperated. And we would both have been better off if we could do it. And I think about a lot of these considerations. I think about being behind a veil of ignorance. So suppose if there's 2 agents and they don't know who they're going to be in the situation, you can think about there's facts to be known about what norms would sort of optimally achieve everyone getting their goals if they didn't know who they were going to be. So there's a sort of like that is I guess a similar way of thinking about just like, listen, there's facts to be known about when agents interact, how they can maximize achieving their goals. So yeah.
And do you consider this a type of realism, or do you just
I
not
think
really
this
care
is a
about the
kind of moral
terminology?
realism because I think there are facts to be known about what we should do.
And would it be a type of naturalism, I'm assuming, instead of
Yeah.
non-naturalism?
Yeah. So I think like things like Platonism are silly. The idea that it like exists is I think that's kind of wild. And I also think that the idea that like that's necessarily motivational is nonsense. But I think that the sense in which it's realism is it's not dependent on my culture. It's not dependent on my personal values. The fact that the universe has a sort of prisoner's dilemma structure whenever two agents interact is sort of a structural feature of reality. And it's also a structural feature of reality that if we could arrange to both cooperate, we would both be better off. And I think a natural reading of that situation is we should cooperate in that situation. I think it's just like a natural reading of this structural feature of reality. And so it's obviously it's all dependent on ultimately on our goals, but at the same time, there are facts to be known about the optimal way different goals could interact without like and maximally achieve their goals.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I don't disagree that there are facts of the kind that you propose. It's just that they strike me, and for a moral naturalist, like a naturalist realist, they may just shrug at this and go, "Yeah, so what?" Uh, I still see that these as fully reducible to certain kinds of descriptive facts about the relation between agents and the means of achieving the goals of those agents. And so, for me, this still looks like a type of anti-realism rather than a type of realism, not because there are these natural facts or descriptive facts, and a naturalist realist might say, there you go, those are the moral facts. But in every case in which there would be some optimal fact about what would optimize my goals, like in a prisoner's dilemma, it would optimize my goals to cooperate. It's still dependent in a certain way on my values. So
Yeah.
whatever would optimize my interests, like my interests are still playing a sort of integral part in determining what would be the case, but like what would be the case in terms of optimization. But I'm wondering if what you might try to say is there's like a higher order principle where you would be saying, yeah, but I don't actually have to know the specific content of your goals and anybody else's goals, regardless of whatever your goals happen to be. There's going to be a stance independent fact that there's going to be some procedure or strategy or optimization algorithm that would achieve your goals, uh, regardless of whatever those goals happen to be. And that algorithm, there could be like recurring and reliable patterns in what those decision processes look like. And those are not up to us.
Yeah.
They're not stance dependent.
Yeah. I think that also to be clear, I'm not just saying there's a fact about there's a fact about what you should do. That's the what should I do. But then I'm saying there's what should we do is a slightly different question, and it takes into your account your goals as well. So when I say what should we do, baked into that is just let's just stipulate that both of our goals matter. What is the optimal way to maximize both of those together? That's not the same question as given only my goals matter. What is the optimal way to achieve those goals? I'm just saying there's a separate, different fact is both of our goals all matter. What is the optimal way to interrelate? You know, what is the optimal way to achieve those goals? And to think back to the island example, like so what should we do to get off the island? Like I like suppose you're better at building boats and I'm better at cutting down wood. Like if we could design it not knowing if we could design it, it would be better if you built the boats, I cut down the wood, we like work together. Like there's a sort of there is a fact about given if both of our goals matter, what is the optimal way to get it? Like what would maximize everyone getting their goals? I think that's just a fact about the universe that is a separate fact from what would just achieve my goals. And they're just separate facts. They're just
They are separate, but they still look to me like they're stance dependent. And that's why all of this is still like it's like
yeah.
floating on top of ultimately goal maximization.
Yes.
And so there may be these stance independent descriptive facts about like there might be a fact about what diplomatic procedure would best result in minimizing the likelihood of a conflict between two warring nations, and
Yeah.
that it would be true that this solution would optimize both of their respective goals independent of them like optimizing them in the absence of the other or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
uh, but those kinds of facts still, in a way, are dependent on there being agents with goals, and the facts are in some way contingent on and subordinate to the agents having those goals. Like the moment an agent's goals change, there might still be the descriptive fact about, hey, they should cooperate, but it's still the case that these facts about optimization are dependent on goals in some way, even if we don't specify the content of the goals.
I
So
agree.
it just seems like second order stance dependence. It's like
Well,
there are stance independent facts about what would promote the stance dependent goals of agents in conflict with one another. And so I'm happy to agree that there's stance independent facts of that kind. But
yeah,
since there's stance independent facts about the relation of stance dependent goals, it still seems like ultimately what we're saying we should do collectively or whatever is in some way sitting on top of and necessarily dependent upon goal success as being ultimately what we're after.
yeah. But I just want to notice that there's a big difference between stance dependent in the sense that my how I think about it changes it. So like if I say that like what is fashionable is stance dependent, what I'm kind of saying is how I'm thinking about it changes the fact about what is in fact fashionable. Whereas if I say, hey, if I want ice cream, this is the optimal way to get ice cream. There is an optimal way for me to get ice cream that does not depend on how I'm thinking about it. It does ultimately depend on my goals, but it is not dependent on how I'm thinking about it or how I'm appraising it. It's a fact outside of me. Given my goal, what's the optimal way to achieve it? That is outside of me, even if my preferences are baked into it in a way that's different from the fashion example.
Right. It is different. But I think that that's already going to be presupposed by an anti-realist. So, for instance, I have a drink here, and there's going to be facts about, like, if I'm thirsty and I want to not be thirsty, there are going to be facts about how to quench my thirst that are not stance dependent. They're not up to me. So, I can't drink the metal of the cup to quench my thirst, even if
Yeah.
I wanted to. So,
Yes.
certain sorts of facts aren't made true by your preferences, and certain sorts of facts almost trivially so are. Like if I'm drinking tea, so if I say I like tea, that's made true by the fact that I like tea. I could stop liking tea, and
Yeah.
then the statement I like tea would no longer be true. And so the kinds of game theoretic facts you're talking about, I can't make those true or false by fiat or by desire.
Yes.
uh, but it's already the case that other descriptive facts are like that on an anti-realist framework. Nevertheless, I do think that there's something special about the kinds of facts that you're talking about, because they have, maybe a realist would say that the difference is that they're normative and the other facts are not normative. And even if the normative facts are reducible to certain sorts of descriptive facts, we could you know uh, it's raining is not normative, but we should cooperate. Even if I reduce that to a descriptive fact, yeah, reduce doesn't mean eliminate. It's
Yeah.
still a normative fact. So there would be normative facts, and the normative facts wouldn't be it. You could say directly made true by a preference or attitude or value
Yeah.
or something like that. So they're
Yeah.
sort of indirectly made true by them in a certain sense. And so
I,
that's like a weird category. We quasi realism is already taken up as a name, so you can't use that. But you could
but
have like a
yeah,
intero realism, semi realism, something like that. I
yes,
don't
am I
know.
realize? Let's go. Sam realism. Let's do it. No. Okay. Rosen realism. So anyway, I share your intuition that saying you just should do something without reference to some sort of goal is gobbledygook. Like that's something I think that you share a strong intuition. That it's like saying this phone is taller than what? I share your intuition that you, according to some, for should to even make sense, it has to be relative to some goal state. And so I'm just saying that the goal state that is relevant is when me and you are talking, there is a goal state, which is both of us maximizing our preferences. That is a goal state. And then there's facts to be known about what achieves that. And so it's a hypothetical imperative, but it's a hypothetical imperative that takes other people's goals into account, but it's still, it's, yeah, as you say, independent. It's indirectly stance dependent, but there is a sense in which it is true about the universe and not just true by my fiat or my appraisal.
Yeah, and those are interesting facts. The thing is, what's interesting about this is that if you were to construe these as like a naturalist realist, typically my way of objecting to naturalist realism is to argue that it's trivial. And what I mean a variety of things when I say that it's trivial. I mean, at least one, there's a subjective sense of something being trivial, which is I don't care about it. But another sense, a more substantive sense in which something is trivial, is if its truth wouldn't change anything you would expect. You wouldn't be surprised by anything. Like, so someone says, hey, imagine this was true. And I go, okay, now it's true. Do I expect anything different to happen in the world? No. Do I make any different predictions about the world? No. Does it have any practical relevance to my day-to-day decisions? No. That's how a standard form of naturalist realism strikes me. So if someone says, hey, moral facts are facts about well-being, okay, well, I already thought there were facts about well-being. So that doesn't do
Yeah,
anything for me, practically speaking. And in that sense, it strikes me as trivial. In that, another way, this is something Isaac Ask Yourself puts it, something like, how does he put it? Um, I can agree to everything that you're saying and like still maintain my position. Like it'd be like, yeah, I don't like it. It doesn't do anything as a view. But what you're proposing, there would be these facts that would be important for me to know,
yeah,
and I don't currently know all of those facts.
yes,
So, like, I don't know the optimal outcomes of like if I run into conflicts with somebody else, I would like to know what I could say or do or what strategy that I could employ that would optimize for my outcomes. Uh, and it's not just going to be up to me what that strategy would be. And so now I face an epistemic challenge, which is what's the best way of navigating this interaction with this other person. The thing is, practically speaking, that still does look to me like, you know, I want to be happy and I don't know what job to choose. That doesn't make it
yeah.
not. I'm still an anti-realist about that, and so I still don't think, practically speaking, there's a big gap between an anti-realist and what you're describing.
I
But it
agree.
does still seem like you're picking out a special set of facts that at least are interesting in a way. Morality is about well-being is not very interesting. It's not very surprising.
Yeah. Well, here's what I want to say. Suppose me and you are going to get teleported to another island, and I say, okay, before we go to this island, what should we do on the island? And then you go, well, we shouldn't torture each other. And I go, okay, yeah, we shouldn't torture each other. Like that, me talking about what we should do is this. I'm not just asking the question of should I torture Lance. I'm with you trying to like understand this larger space of like what are the norms and practices and behaviors that we could enact that would maximize our goals. Like that's I think that is the natural reading of what should we do on this island. And this me saying, well, we shouldn't torture each other is also feels like a moral claim, even though it also is it is also I'm claiming it's also a descriptive fact about what would maximize us achieving our goals given all of our goals matter, like given this hypothetical imperative structure that is in self-descriptive. So yeah, I mean, do you agree that it's sensible to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't torture each other as like a thing to say for
I do, but I do still worry that if I'm on an island with somebody else and I agree that we should torture each other, that agreement is conditional on a few things. One would be I might agree to rules like that because I don't really want to torture other people
yeah,
and I don't want to be tortured. And so it's not that big of a loss for me to not have to be able to torture you.
yeah,
And so it's like I'm agreeing to something. It's like, hey, let's not punch each other in the face. Well, I don't want to get punched in. I don't want to punch you in the face. And so
yeah,
it's win-win for me. I wouldn't want to punch you and I wouldn't want to get punched. Uh,
yeah,
but the other thing is that all of these negotiations, I mean, one would be conditional on whether I would want to do the things in the first place, and the other is conditional on what I'm capable of doing. So, like the reason I wouldn't want to just trample over somebody, like, okay, let's say you're trying to buy a car from somebody. Um, they want to sell the car for a certain price. You want to buy a car for a certain price. If I had no qualms against doing so, and I was confident I could get away with it, I could just steal the car, and there would
yeah.
be nothing stopping me from doing that. The only reason that I would negotiate with the person is either because I don't want to be the sort of person that steals cars or because it's too risky to steal the car. Like maybe I could, but I do the cost benefit analysis relative to my goals and values and judge that it's not worth that cost. And so all of the game theoretic uh, outcomes that you're talking about are still subordinate to facts about the agent's goals because the agent is still going to be making these cost benefit analyses about what it could get away with. If you could always get away with defecting and take and like reaping all the rewards, why wouldn't you? Unless you didn't
Um,
want to, which is then acting on your values.
I think that if someone was an omnipotent god, like the we question is a little bit silly because like just they should just do whatever achieves their goals. But I think that like we could crush ants, right? Like humans have the power to crush ants, but like if we think about this, like if we could arrange it, what would be the optimal arrangement for us and ants interacting? If me and us and the ants could interact, it would probably be better as if the ants like collected gold dust and made little gold things and traded to us, and we gave them honey, and that would sort of achieve both our goals and the ants' goals better than if we just destroyed the ants or if we had a big war with the ants. Like there's this sort of harmonious relationship with ants that if we could get off the ground would be better for us and for the ants. And I just think lots of things in the universe are like that, where if you could set up the harmonious arrangement, it would be better. Now, we might not be able to get the harmonious arrangement off the ground, but there's still a fact about what the harmonious arrangement would look like that stands independent. And it's useful to know that even if you can't be motivated to do it, even if you can't get off the ground, it's just useful to know that, hey, if we could arrange it, if we could do the right incentive systems, there is a sort of an optimal harmonious arrangement for us to interact.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's probably lots of facts like that.
Yeah. Now, do you broadly agree with my parable of the purple creatures thing?
I don't know if I remember it. Did you already give it? I already forgot.
Not in this podcast, but I've sent you the essay before. So the parable of the purple creatures for the reader is just imagine a town. They think that witches are poisoning their wells. They go research the matter. It turns out that it's not witches exactly. It's these purple aliens, but they wear witch hats and they have broomsticks and they're like, and they are poisoning the wells and they have cats. They don't do magic. They don't know Satan, but they are wearing the witch hat and the broomstick and cackling and with cats. And then there's kind of this question of like, okay, so we were trying to refer to witches. We looked into the matter. There's a thing that's kind of like witches and it's kind of not like witches. And we could have we can decide to call them witches or not. This is a pragmatic question. Depends on the laws about witches that are on the book. Depends about how much confusion this would cause. Like, would calling those purple things witches cause the townsfolk to think they can do magic even though they can't? How much confusion would it cause? So these are sort of pragmatic considerations. So I think a lot of times this goes on in philosophy where we're trying to refer to a thing. We find out that nothing in the world quite matches the sense that we thought that the thing that we were referencing has, but there are things that are close to it that we kind of have a pragmatic question of whether we want to call it the thing. So that's my parable of the purple creatures. And I think that it's relevant to philosophy because I go, okay, we thought that what moral realism was there's these rules that exist in the Platonic realm, and just learning them causes you to both know the moral facts and then be motivated to do them. Okay, turns out that's not real. Now there are these stands independent facts about what the optimal way for two agents to like achieve their goals are if they could set it up in advance. That is a stance independent fact. It's not the thing you wanted, but it's close to it. Do we want to call it moral realism? Kind of a pragmatic question. It depends how much confusion this would cause. Depends if this is in any way helps people think about this. So that's why I think like the question of like, is it moral realism? Like it's kind of like moral realism. And I think there are other things that would be kind of like moral realism as well that aren't my view, but are sort of close enough to the Platonic thing, but far enough from anti-realism that if they were true, I would want to say that there is something like moral realism is true.
Yeah. So I definitely agree with that story. Richard Joyce employs a witch thing in an air theoretic context to talk about like the negotiability of our concepts. And I don't know what conclusion he comes down to, but it's interesting that people draw on the witch stories. I think there's something fun about them. Although you have to add this extra weird element of aliens. I used to be obsessed with adding aliens to every single thought experiment. Yeah, so it is a matter of negotiation. And I might seem to be the most arch anti-realist in the universe, to the point where no one could imagine me saying, "Oh, I'm a realist." But there have been a couple naturalists that look. You could just pitch naturalism this way. Let's just say I stipulate that what I mean by a stance independent moral fact is a fact about what increases well-being or reduces suffering.
Yeah.
Now, do you agree that they're stance independent moral facts? Well, of course.
Yeah.
And so, hey, they're stance independent moral facts. Boom, you've got a moral realism. So, I don't. If you are careful with your stipulations about what you mean by the terms you're using, you can stipulate your way trivially to me just going, sure, then I'm a moral realist by those lights. The same way you could do it with theism or literally anything else. In some of those cases, it'd be a bit more of a stretch. It'd be a bit weirder. But in the case of moral realism, the naturalist accounts come close enough where it doesn't sound quite as outrageous and ridiculous as it would be in a lot of other scenarios. And then it just comes down to that pragmatic dispute. Do we want to call this a realism? Is this a realism?
Yeah.
Just like, is this a witch?
So,
And I think those are important questions. It's the same thing with stuff about free will and consciousness. Do we want to
yeah.
call it that? Do we want to call it that? And I don't always think the answer is no. I'm not always for jettisoning long established language if it's a cost benefit thing. It's a trade-off.
Yeah.
Do I think that this language would be beneficial, or do I think it would be more harmful? And unfortunately that's a tough empirical question. And
Yeah.
so we just have to engage in this sort of you could call it educated if you want, but basically empirical speculation about what the outcomes would be. And we might not agree on what outcomes we want to optimize for.
Yeah. By the way, I don't think that what I'm talking about with morality is in fact capturing what everyone means by morality, but I do think it is a natural reading of what a lot of moral people, what a lot of people are saying when they say, "Oh, we shouldn't torture each other." Like, I think it's a natural reading of it would be better off for both of us if we didn't torture each other. Is a natural reading of we shouldn't torture each other, or if we could set it up in a system where we don't rob each other, we would be better off than if we didn't. That feels to me like a natural reading of a lot of people's moral talk, even if lots of people's moral talk isn't that. So what I'm saying is, I'm saying, hey, here's this thing that kind of captures lots of our intuitions. We could talk about morality this way. We don't have to, but hey, think about it. Maybe we should vote on it. Maybe we should say, hey, this is a good way of doing it. And then I'm just suggesting it as a way we could do it, and see if you like it. Try it on for size,
Yeah, when you describe it that way, I don't know why I was like unable to talk for a second. I was like, it starts to sound a bit like a type of constructivism. But I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, this question of is it a realism almost becomes uninteresting, because the kinds of things that I object to, I can just tell you what I object to. And the main thing, for instance, is like, it's not stance independence. I don't have a problem with stance independent facts. My specific issue with moral realism is irreducible normativity. And you're not even talking about irreducible normativity. And there's a related cluster of concepts. And you've already mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned this, like the notion of a reason. So is that what you were talking about earlier? Like, so someone will say you have a reason to do this. And someone like Parfit or Scanlon, they'll present these as unanalyzable notions that don't bottom out and aren't reducible to facts about our desires and or relational facts about means of achieving our desires. You just have a reason, full stop.
Yeah.
And that, to me, you gave that example of like it saying it's something like this phone is intrinsically taller. Tallness is a relational concept, and
Yeah.
reasons I see as it's like it's something I've said before, but it almost seems to me like if someone says you have a reason to do that, but their reason isn't related to any goal or value, it's almost like bad grammar. It'd be like if someone
Yeah.
said put the shoes. I'd be like, put the shoes where? And they're like, no, just put the shoes.
Yes.
They don't understand how words work. So if
Yeah.
someone says you just have a reason, what the hell could that possibly mean?
Yeah.
That is the stuff that I'm after. It's primarily non-naturalist realism. Naturalist realism seems to me, the reason I found that largely objectionable is, what's the point? Why are you trying to latch on to realism about morality? To me, it sounds very like, imagine naturalist theism, where they're like, look, we know that there's no omnipotent, transcendent being, but isn't ultimate purpose in the universe good enough? Isn't it up to me to say no? What if I say no? No, it's not good enough. Now what? So if you presented this and said, isn't it good enough or close enough to call it a moral realism? I'm inclined to just say no.
Yeah.
And now what? I don't think a lot rides on that, because you could just say, okay, fine, it's moral schmealism. Now, isn't moral schmealism true? Can't we start working on this? And then I would say, sure, this does seem like something worth working on. Shouldn't we start figuring out the optimal means of getting people to like cooperate with one another? Like, shouldn't we figure out what these game theoretic optimums are and then start pointing out to people, hey, if you idiots stop defecting and start doing this and this and this, we'll all be better off. You'll be better off by your own lights, and all the people you're fighting with, they'll be better off. It's win-win. So can't we hunt down all these win-win solutions together? Isn't this good for us?
Well, let's find out what all the let's find out what all the win-win solutions are, and let's find out, once we find them out, let's figure out the best incentive systems to get them off the ground. So even if you can't motivate you to do them, we can now motivate with the correct incentive system to get the win-win off the ground, because now that we know what the win-win looks like, we can now know how to sort of do things to help achieve that win-win. And one reason I think this is interesting is I think that if we met aliens, I think they would not share. I would bet a lot of money that any aliens that has conscious agents interacting with each other, they wouldn't be constantly murdering each other. They wouldn't be constantly torturing each other. They wouldn't be constantly beating each other, because that is, in some sense, it is better for them to refrain from killing each other than it is for them to constantly kill each other. And that they will notice this, and that their norms will reflect this. And so even if not everything is like that, and even if they won't agree with us on like many moral claims, there are certain sort of structural features of conscious agents interacting that any intelligent system will notice that, oh, it's better for us to not do the thing to each other. It's better if we can get it off the ground. It's better for us to CC than to defect. And so this is like, it's not dependent on our culture. It's more like a fact about agency itself, which feels stance independent. So that's one reason why I find it like, that's why I want to call it kind of a realism. Aliens will discover it.
The reason I brought up triviality objections to naturalism is that it's not so clear that what you're describing is quite as trivial as what I would say of a lot of other naturalisms, because there would be facts for me to discover that would be surprising.
Yeah.
So I would go, oh, I actually would change how it. So you are describing a set of facts where I don't know what the facts are. They don't trivially map on the facts I already know the answers to. Although I guess you could say, oh, well, moral facts are facts about well-being, but you would still have to go out and discover what facts would promote well-being. So maybe this isn't quite so distinct from existing approaches, but I don't know. It sounds more interesting, at least.
I don't think aliens will necessarily even be motivated to not torture like bugs or something like that. Like in the same way that like we don't exactly have a game theoretic reason not to hurt like an earthworm. Like it can't really cooperate or defect against us. There's not really like our consideration for the earthworm's well-being only kind of depends on our own preferences about the matter. And
right.
So that feels more aesthetic, more like just a personal desire. But when I talk about the aliens in the society not murdering each other, it doesn't feel like it's like an aesthetic thing. It feels like they are noticing a structural feature of agency itself. They are noticing that if they kill each other, like they will be worse off, and so it's very likely that they'll discover this, even if they won't discover the worm torture thing. Like,
right. So let's see though if there's some problems with this. So what if there was a being that had the value of defecting for its own sake?
Yes, and in that case, then there's not. Yeah, I mean, I guess the game theoretic optimal is that we both defect on each other. Do you know what I mean? Because like I don't gain anything. I don't gain anything from cooperating, and then they don't gain anything from cooperating, obviously. So then that's the game theoretic optimum, right? Like, you see, like,
I guess so. Yeah, no, it would be always defect.
Yeah.
So it might be they might try to deceive you into cooperating and then defecting or something.
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, and then
there's also you could value. Not so someone could say, look, it's not that I value defection for its own sake. It's that I value a system in which we don't all conform to this like game theoretic optimums, because I want there to be competition. I want to defect sometimes, cooperate sometimes. I want a cool story in the universe. I want competition. I want battles. I want, imagine this like Valhalla agent that like just wants, look, it's win-win if we battle it out and have a conflict of goals, because I die and I go to Valhalla, or I win and I get the glory of winning, and I get to, either way I want to end up in the meat hole, but I'm not going to get there by being buddies with you.
Yeah.
So that value there, they might value chaos. They might just want chaos. And so they might make decisions randomly or arbitrarily. So you could imagine a host of agents where like relative to their goals or preferences, it actually wouldn't be optimal for them to cooperate specifically.
Yes.
But I think, as you already noted, there would still be like a descriptive fact about what optimization algorithm would be the best one for them to implement.
Yeah.
And that might not be dependent on their goals or values. So even if you value chaos, like how much chaos, like, and how often do you cooperate? You don't get to decide that.
And
it's dependent on the other agents.
Suppose me and the chaos agent, had a conversation behind the veil of ignorance, and I said, hey, would it be good for your values if I gave you half of the universe and just give you free reign to create chaos, and then I had my half of the universe where I didn't have chaos, would that be good enough for your values, such that I would never in any way try to be in conflict with you over your chaos goals? You could just, and they're like, no, I want to fight with you. And I go, okay, is there an amount of fighting that like I could do to you that wouldn't destroy me? It would allow us to fight. You know what I mean? Like we could, if the chaos agent was able to talk about it, we could talk about what its actual goals are, and then given my goals, what would be the optimal thing to balance out our goals. And even if the chaos agent doesn't want to do that, there's still this fact about like, okay, does the chaos agent want, like, would it be okay if I just sent an army once every 50 years and it got to battle that? Would it prefer that to wiping us out? If it would prefer just to wipe us out, well, then maybe it's back to the defect bot. You know what I mean? But if it has any goal, anyway,
yeah, I'm imagining a scenario where this agent wants there to be chaos and you don't want there to be chaos, and you're like, look, if you fight me, there's a 50% chance I will just kill you, and then there will be no chaos because I'll just pave the world in order and law. So if you actually want chaos, fighting me is not a great idea. But I still think there's a way around this. So I wouldn't be describing the agent as having like an instrumental, like it wants there to be. What it could actually do is favor decision procedures themselves. So it's not a consequentialist chaos machine. It's or agent. It's not like I want to optimize the amount of chaos that occurs. It's that I'm a deontological chaos machine. I want to act from the principles of chaos. And so in acting from the principles of chaos, I will not negotiate with you like screw you. And so we're not going to engage in this. So you try to talk to it in the veil of ignorance, and it's like chaos. And you're like, okay, but like half the universe chaos. And you're just like, okay, but I'll wipe you out. And it just goes chaos.
And I'm like, what if I gave you an option where I give you like the maximum number of decisions you can make such that you could be chaotic in all those decisions? And it's just like chaos. Like it doesn't in any way allow you to,
like it just values chaos.
Yeah.
Period. Like it values acting on the like it's like a Kantian chaos optimizer. Like it must act. So like it could have the value of do not negotiate with anybody. As a deontological principle. And there could still be an agent like that, and it would in fact be in its interest to never negotiate. And I don't think you could get around that. And so like a conventional form of moral realism, you would say that agent is making morally incorrect decisions. But your view, it wouldn't be. I mean, it's a silly agent.
I think here's what my view would say about it. It'd be something like this. My view, the we facts, what we should do facts are facts about kind of like a veil of ignorance facts. And the chaos agent doesn't know whether he's going to be the chaos agent or me. And so given there's a 50% chance that he'll be the chaos agent, he should just take 50% of the universe because like what I'm saying is like if he doesn't know whether he's going to be the chaos agent or me, he should make the universe such that there's some if he's the chaos agent, he gets to get chaos, and if he's not the chaos agent, he gets to have some of this other things. So like I guess there are these facts about like what would maximize both of our goals, given that you don't know who you're going to be in the situation. And it doesn't look like, even if he wouldn't make the negotiation, there's still this fact about like what would be rational if we were just trying to maximize both of our goals. What in fact would be the rational thing, even if it won't do it. And I think the rational thing for the chaos agent to do is to realize that, you know, there's a 50-50 chance of who he could be, and then behind the veil of ignorance, it should leave some ability to chaos and some ability for not being chaos. That's my intuition about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I start to worry about the veil of ignorance as a thought experiment tool here. So here we're supposing that we're imagining agents that are making decisions independent of knowing what kind of agent they would be once they're in the universe. So it doesn't know if it's going to be a chaos agent or not. And now we're reasoning, what would it decide if it doesn't know whether it's a chaos agent or not? But now what standards are we using for what would be reasonable for an agent to decide behind the veil of ignorance before knowing what kind of agent it is? We have to impose some presumptive standards.
Well, I'm just trying to say maximize chaos agent and maximize values and maximize the chaos agent's values. And that is the strategy we're trying to do.
Right. And it works for that. But what I'm saying is there's no agent-free way of imagining an agent behind the veil of, there's no value-free way of imagining an agent behind the veil of ignorance, because it could be behind the veil of ignorance and still be a chaos maximizer from the perspective of deciding. So you and a bunch of other agents are in the veil of ignorance. You don't know which agents you're going to be once you're in the world, but one of the agents in your behind your veil of ignorance is like chaos. Like in that domain. That's how it's making decisions. So if you're imagining a non-chaos being deciding on what principles or rules to live by under the conditions that it might end up being an a chaos being, you're already presupposing it's not acting on the principle of chaos in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do see what you mean.
But if it is behind the veil of ignorance, you're still, this problem just repeats at the behind the veil of ignorance, and I don't think it's avoidable.
I don't think the agent is what's deciding things behind the veil of ignorance. I think it's like, I think there's just facts to be known about what maximizes both agents' values, even if they're not making the decision about whether that's true. That there is a fact about, okay, so the ice cream example. I want ice cream. There's no other agents in the universe. There's a fact to be known about what achieves my goal of getting the ice cream. If I go behind the veil of ignorance, it's me making the choice. I may make stupid decisions about what in fact would get me ice cream, but there's still just like sort of a physical fact about what is the most optimal way for me to get the ice cream. And so I think there's like a physical fact about what sort of arrangements maximize you and the chaos agent's goals, regardless of whether it would sort of agree behind the veil of ignorance. I'm not asking it to agree. I'm saying that there's this fact about, in fact, what maximizes both of their well-being.
Yeah, I've understood the veil of ignorance to be like, what would we agree to behind the veil of ignorance? And so there's an agentic aspect of that that bakes in the notion that the beings agreeing have values and preferences. Am I wrong? That's how I've always understood it.
I'm not using the exact Rawlsian veil of ignorance. I'm just, you know what I mean? I'm just saying, hey, for this thought experiment, let's just, this is a helpful way of thinking about it.
Okay.
And like what's motivating it is like the island and getting off the boat example. Suppose there's a cannibal on the island who wants to eat people. There's you on the island. What is the optimal arrangement for you and the cannibal to achieve your goals? Well, if you could do things like cut off your leg so the cannibal gets to eat something, but then the cannibal gives you a boat so you get to get off the island. Like, you know what I mean? There could be some balance.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is still all operating under the assumption that the agents in question are trying to optimize
both
outcomes. But agents could, in principle, value decision theoretic procedures independent of their outcomes. So basically, you have, I think that what you're proposing faces this problem of the deontological agent, and that agent could just value it, like in and of itself, non-instrumentally, complying with some decision theoretic procedure that is inconsistent with the facts that you propose. And under those circumstances, it wouldn't be making any mistakes relative to its values, even if it was acting relative to the descriptive, like game theoretic optimums. It's acting in a suboptimal way. It's not acting in a suboptimal way relative to its principles and values.
Yeah. I'm not sure what to say about that. I kind of want to just say like, hey, we can arrange you to be in universes where you get to make more of those deontic choices. And maybe it will say, hey, no, that's like cheating. You're sort of like it's not the case that the person that's the deontic good maximizer just wants to make like one deontic choice every second. Like that's not what it's like trying to optimize. But yeah, I don't exactly know what to think about that. And that's a good thought. I don't know. I'll have to think about that more,
Yeah, I'm not saying this because I think it undermines the fact that there are facts of this kind. I'm saying this to try to draw a distance between what you're describing and like a conventional account of moral realism. There's these objectives that I take at least non-naturalist moral realists to favor. Maybe other naturalists besides the account you're proposing would be willing to let go of some of these features. But non-naturalist moral realists, they want there to be this like, there's a variety of terms that are used in the academic literature. There's like clout, authoritativeness, oomph, like practical oomph. They want to be able to say, look, given these moral facts, you shouldn't do that. That's bad. That's wrong. You're making a mistake. On those views, like it's just true if you're a non-naturalist that there's this set of stance independent, irreducibly normative facts, and you should comply with them. And if you don't want to, too bad. You still should, because you just should. But
that feels more like a language game. That feels more like a language game. Whereas
I agree. But like those, you don't get those shoulds. You don't have that authority. So, because if you run into this deontic chaos agent that's like, I have a Kantian duty to optimize, like for making decisions chaotically. There's nothing you could say that would show that it's mistaken according to its values, and you don't have any extra agentic non-relative set of standards to say that it's incorrect with respect to, other than to just re-describe, hey, there's these game theoretic facts and you're not optimizing for them. It could just be like, yeah, I know, I don't care.
Yeah. I agree. I just think it's a very natural reading of, hey, we're going to this portal. We're going to one-shot Prisoner's Dilemma against each other. What should we do? I think there's there's a very natural, and I think the answer to the what should we do is we should cooperate. I think is the answer to that question.
Yeah.
And then
I agree with you. I would cooperate. You would cooperate.
And
Or at
then
least
you go, and
ideally we would all cooperate. Yeah.
And there is something weird about going, should I do what we should do? Like there is a little bit, there is something a little bit weird about, I mean, should I do what we should do? I mean, I don't know. There's something weird going on with even asking that question. Like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think there is a sort of a bit of motivational force of being like, listen, it would be amazing if we all could do these game theoretic facts. If we could get it off the ground, it would be amazing. And you can see that, and I can see that. Now, I can't make you fucking do it, but there is something fucking stupid. If we can't get it to that we're making these game theoretic optimal choices, there's something stupid that we're doing, and we fucking should be like, we're being idiots if we can't get there. And I feel like there is kind of an oomph there that
it's enough that it actually motivates me. Like that's what I said. I would cooperate, and I think you would. Would you cooperate?
I absolutely do. Yeah.
I cooperate, and like you would say, but it's not like it's not the optimal strategy. I want us all to cooperate. I want that.
Yeah.
I aspire to that. I'm motivated by that. Yeah. I don't know if So there's something interesting about that particular element of what you're presenting.
Yeah. Like when your goals are part of a larger set of goals, so there's the question of like, what should I do based on my goals? And then we add my goals to your goals, and then have that be, there is sort of question like, why should I do it? I mean, you're part of that utility function. Like that's not like, I mean, I don't know. I just want, I'm not explaining that well. I think that these are reason giving. I don't think you can make someone do what they should do. But I think the fact that there is a fact about what we should do has some persuasive force. The fact that there is a truth about what is the most harmonious way for us to achieve both of our goals, and that we can talk about this, I think there's something motivational about that.
Right. But I would still just call it anti-realism because those reasons are still dependent on my values.
Yeah. There are other things that I would call close to moral realism that aren't my view, but are just also things that are like kind of like it. So I think if God actually made laws that put you in hell and heaven if you didn't follow them, it's dependent on God's stances, but like there are literal rules in the universe that you have to follow. So like, and for our intents and purposes, it's real. Like it's independent of our stances. You know what I mean? And so I think that's like, I would call that a kind of realism, even if it's dependent on God's stances, just because it's independent of our stances. I would also call, if it turned out factually that there's just one mind, that all consciousnesses are just one consciousness, let's just stipulate that that's just real, and that like if I hurt you, I'm literally hurting myself. Well, then all the moral facts just reduced to, simple selfish fact. Like, yeah, you should, in the same way that you shouldn't stab yourself on the hand, is the same reason why you shouldn't stab Lance in the face. Like, it's dumb to stab yourself, and then that kind of like like it's intrinsically motivational, and also gets cooperation off the ground. And then I also think that if I found out that if every alien in the universe that couldn't communicate with each other had exactly the same norms, like exactly, like they literally they have words for jaywalking, and they have words for fucking they think that farting at dinner is wrong. You know, I mean, they have all the exact same norms. I would be like, okay, well, there's something fucking weird about the fact that all of these aliens are exactly converging on the same norms. Maybe it's like, maybe there's no stance independent facts, or like maybe they just like, I would just have enough epistemic uncertainty about that's so weird. I'd have so much epistemic uncertainty that I wouldn't like change my inside view intuition that you can't have these like Platonic facts that are motivating, but I would like have enough epistemic uncertainty that I'd be like, fuck, I don't know what's going. Maybe there's something that's like something motivating here that I don't get. Like intrinsic normativity might exist, but it seems unlikely. But like maybe
Yeah, these are interesting. I wouldn't call these types of realism, but I know what you mean when you say like I don't know if you would say they're literally a type of realism, because I think we
no,
already agree it's just a pragmatic question. Uh,
yeah,
yeah, if there's a God that's going to punish and reward people in a way that we are responsive to and we have no control over it, and it's like it's a timeless set of rules that never change and are not contingent on anybody's attitudes or preferences that actually exist, and it's this like being outside the universe that sets the conditions, and you will be treated accordingly if you break the rules. Not only is there something kind of realist-ish about that, it actually seems quite a bit stronger than the non-naturalist secular
yeah,
conception of normative moral realism. Because one of the points I make about that is, let's say I'm a non-naturalist moral realist. I'm convinced it's true. And I also think that I'm an ethical intuitionist, and I think we have intuitive access to what some of the moral facts are. Maybe it's difficult to work out like the particularities of how all the moral facts interact with one another. But I know, for instance, that it's like wrong to torture people just for fun. We all agree. We all know that's a fact. Okay. Now, what are the consequences if you go ahead and do that? Well, there are all the practical consequences, like you could go to prison or whatever, but set aside all of those. Let's just say you just break a moral rule and there's no practical consequences that are imposed on you by others. What happens? Nothing.
yeah.
There's no consequences. Like David Lewis has a quote about this. I always forget the quote, but it's like,
Did you expect philosophy
real
to replace the hangman?
right. It's like some sort of certain folk labels would apply to you. So we would say, what you did was morally wrong. You would say that it's morally wrong. Okay. And if I don't care about that, I'm just going to go, yeah, okay, it's morally wrong. So what? But if there's like a dude in the sky that's going to come down and be like, hey, you tortured a baby, I'm going to kick your ass, and he proceeds to kick your ass.
Yeah,
You get kicked like through a mountain, and then
yeah.
he's like, now I'm going to set you on fire for 6 million years. Okay. Maybe I would go, all right, I'll hold off on the torture then. I don't want to get set on fire for 6 million years.
Yeah,
So like talk about practical oomph. That's quite a bit of oomph.
yeah.
So
Like it
you
has
got
some
that.
sense dependence, but it's got a lot of oomph. You know what I mean? Like,
It's got all the oomph. Yeah.
yeah.
So you got that. What was the other one that you mentioned?
If we're all the same mind, literally, so
Oh,
that
right.
and then all forms of cooperation just immediately become rational. I have to get a drink of water so I can hear you.
Yeah, yeah. So that would give you an interesting state of affairs, because what you could appeal to something like Hume's argument from moral convergence and take that as evidence that some form of non-naturalist moral realism is true, and then go, okay, so moral realism is true, and that's the evidence that moral realism is true. But let's say you can't get over your conceptual hangups with moral realism, and you're like, look, I can't really accept moral realism. Nevertheless, there do appear to be a couple things that might happen. I mean, one is that I would be really weirded out and probably less confident in being an anti-realist. It would be weird if I wasn't less confident. But the other thing is, like, even if I'm not convinced that moral realism is true, that that observation matters. I like something's got to come from that. Like
Yeah.
everyone, so yeah, you find this isolated species on a remote planet that's never had any contact. It couldn't possibly have picked up radio signals anywhere. And we go land there and like, all right, we found the one isolated communicating civilization, and we talk to them, and they're like, yeah, don't fart at the dinner table. And like we run all these evolutionary simulations. It's not a product of natural selection. It's not a product of like facts about they reason to this somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I don't know what I would do at that point. I would be like something funny, something
Yeah.
like maybe moral realism or something
Yeah.
weirder. I don't even
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe there's some agent that's like communicating with all the agents and then like pressing them. Maybe it's like maybe there's just some it would be weird. And then
We
what
could
about
be
the
in a
case?
we
Sorry.
could be in a simulation and a being just coded us all the same way, like it just copy pasted or
Yeah. Yeah.
agency. Like there's lots of stuff that could explain that other than moral realism being true. But whatever it's going to get to the point where the alternatives to moral realism are going to be really super weird anyway, and they're all weird.
Yeah. And what about the case where everyone is literally the same mind? That like,
Right.
in fact, is the case that me and you are the same.
There might be ways of
From the same
finessing
soul.
that.
What?
Because like there might be ways of finessing where, like, for instance, you might say, well, if we're all the same being, you know, conditional on the fact that you don't want to hurt yourself, it wouldn't make sense for you to hurt other people.
Yeah.
But what if an agent goes, well, I believed it was logically like prior to knowing we're all the same person. I believed it's okay to hurt you, but to not, it's stupid to hurt myself because I don't want to do that. Now that I know that you are me, one way of resolving the logical inconsistency there is to say, okay, well, it's wrong to harm myself. You are me, so it's wrong to harm you. But there is another way, which is to say it's okay to harm some parts of myself and not other parts of myself.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
you could do that.
Yeah, yeah.
So someone like a person could say, I could stab my left arm, but not my right arm or something. Like that's a ridiculous value to have, but
yeah.
values aren't incorrect just because they're like weird and ad hoc and arbitrary. They're
Agreed.
just weird and ad hoc and arbitrary.
But what it would do is it would reduce all moral questions to ones of practical reason, and it would make the oomph immediately obvious. Like, yeah, of course you shouldn't torture that baby. You're gonna be that baby, and you don't want to get tortured. So that, like, of course you shouldn't do it. Like, that's dumb. It's not gonna get you the thing you want.
You could at least push a consistency point. Insofar as you don't want to be tortured, you shouldn't torture that baby.
Because you not that you, not even that just you wouldn't want to get tortured. You will. This will cause you to be tortured.
Yeah.
And that would be nice to just, if all
but you could see
moral
the reaction though, right? So someone could say, yeah, okay, so technically I'm being tortured, but I don't have any phenomenology associated with that, so I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, they could just say, I don't care. And then you'd be like, okay. I mean, like, seems a little bit dumb given that you said you don't want torture, but like, there is,
right.
I mean, like,
but they could realize that they are just against torturing this unit. So it'd be like if a neuron discovered, oh, I'm one neuron among many. I thought, it was all about me. But it turns out, I guess I don't care about the other neurons. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that made any sense. I think I got so abstract I lost what my train of thought. Where are we at now? I don't know.
I was just giving a few different things that would be like moral realism, but wouldn't be the same platonic, intrinsically reason-giving, moral realism that some philosophers want, but still have some flavor. It feels moral realism. Either it has oomph or truth value, or like a little bit of both. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the goal here? Why do you want me to consider all these?
Oh, you are the arch anti-realist, and then I'm saying, okay, here's my version of semi-realism, and then here's a few other versions of semi-realism. What do you think about them, Mr. Realism Destroyer? That was kind of my intuition for bringing that up.
I don't like. I'm just like I'm not kind of okay with all of these. My motivations are not real. I call myself an anti-realist quietist, but I don't really like the realism anti-realism framing in the first place. Like whoever came up with that's a ridiculous and really tendentious way of framing things, because it's led people to describe anti-realists as thinking morality isn't real. Well, what the hell would that mean? So like you have moral latitudes, I have moral latitudes. Am I going to say morality? Am I saying those aren't real? That's weird. That's because I don't think there's objective facts about what food tastes good or bad. Do you?
No.
Okay, so we're gastronomic anti-realists. Would it make any sense to say gastronomy is not real?
Yeah.
Food isn't real. Taste isn't real. What the hell? That's such a weird way of framing the view that something isn't stance independent. Like that's all anti-realism. So, I don't like the framing in the first place. But I didn't choose it. I have a problem with specific ways of promoting realism. And my main problems are largely metaphilosophical ones that aren't even distinctive to moral realism. What I take issue with are people saying, I've got this concept. I can't explain to you what the concept means, but I know what it means and my buddies know what it means. And we know we're right. And we just have immediate access to the fact that we're right. And if you don't agree, you're conceptually impoverished or brain damaged or psychopath, or there's something wrong with you, and screw you. There's something weirdly dogmatic about it. And like one of the primary, one of the things I proposed is calling this type of moral realism Morean realism after G.E. Moore. And it's here's a one hand, here's another type arguing is they make these Morean shifts. Is they'll just make this move to say, it's much more implausible that moral realism isn't true than that it is true. And these appeals just appeal directly to the fact that it seems true to them. And this is, you have Mike Humer with phenomenal conservatism. You have Morean type arguments, which are all just fancy ways of to me, I don't like the term question begging, but they just appeal directly to private considerations that the person presenting the argument has that I don't share. I mean, it'd be a bit like saying, imagine an argument like this. If my prior that God exists is one, then God exists. My prior that God exists is one, so God exists. Like, okay, but my prior is not one. So what do I do with your argument? Like,
Yeah.
I have to accept it because your prior's one. And so Morean shifts strike me that way. It's not like I share their attitudes, but I reject the conclusions because of some defeaters that are extraneous to the argument.
Yeah.
I don't accept their premises of the Morean shifts. And the reaction I get from that is often incredulity or disbelief.
Yeah.
Like every other week, I have someone call me a liar, bad faith, disingenuous, dishonest, pretending. I get all that shit pretty much nonstop. Um, it's really annoying. And this is coming from a wing of analytic philosophy, like a rationalistically, a rationalist, dogmatically inclined wing of philosophy that it might pay some degree of lip service to the importance of the empirical sciences, but in practice, there's a kind of contempt or dismissiveness towards them, and this strange presumption that everybody thinks the way that they do, that is it's not supported by available empirical evidence.
Yep.
And there's something that bothers me about it on a sort of personal and aesthetic level. There's a type of a smug incuriosity that I frequently see cultivated within analytic philosophy, where people are just absolutely convinced that their way of thinking is the right way of thinking. And if you don't think that way, you are stupid or ignorant or dishonest. And it just, that really bugs me. And I think it's a major impediment to progress. I think what you're proposing is a great idea. It's actually very similar to what I end up saying. I've had people ask me, if anti-realism is true, what do we do? So, like, if you did have to have a positive proposal, what would it look like? And I've said before, my positive practical proposal for like normative ethics is diplomacy,
Yeah.
which sounds eerily similar to what you're describing. It's,
Yeah.
look, I got my goals, you've got yours. The way for us to get things done is to sit down and hash those facts out. The fact that I want these things and you want those things. What's the optimal solutions we can arrive at? So it
Yeah.
sounds like we're both converging on a very, very similar set of considerations.
Yeah.
And I'm calling it anti-realism and you're calling it realism, or some kind of semi-realism.
And
And
I'm kind
maybe
of
that's
just
not
saying,
important.
if you could model what the diplomacy would be, like it makes sense for you to follow what the diplomacy, the outcome of that diplomacy before you even do it. That there's some sense in which that's sensible to do and think about. You don't have to actually do it. You and the person could sort of from an armchair think about what the optimal diplomacy would be, even if you didn't in person hash it out. And that is like an interesting thing to do. But yeah, there is a convergence there. I think it's very weird how philosophers take their seemings as like given. Like, do you not know that evolutionary biology is a thing? Like, the way things seem to us is like had to evolve. You know what I mean? Like, of course, you know, things seem a way to us, but that only is true because there's selection pressures for it. And I don't know. There's something very odd about people taking their seemings as completely given.
Yeah, not just biological evolution, but cultural evolution in your specific cultural history and like life experiences. So there's something very strange about philosophers being relatively inattentive to the historical contingencies that may have led them to having the particular philosophical disposition that they have. Had Western philosophy not been dominated by Plato and Aristotle, but it had instead been dominated by, I don't know, Democritus and Leucippus, or Epicurus, or something. Some different set of thinkers had formed the foundations, or had Christianity somehow been stuffed out and some type of paganism were the primary religion of the Western world. I don't know what would be different in the philosophical landscape, but it may have been very different. I did ask Kane B once, and I think he thought things we would end up pretty much in the same place, but I'm not so sure. It's a complicated anthropological question. We might end up like in pretty similar places, or we might end up in radically different places. But you have contemporary secular non-naturalist moral philosophers saying it's obvious that there's these stance independent moral facts. Okay, but they are steeped in 2000 plus years of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam.
Yeah.
And like the whole like scholastic thing and all of like philosophy being refiltered through a Christian lens
Yeah.
and delivered to us through centuries of Christian influences. And that's all surrounding us in our culture. It's something I've pointed out to people before, is like there are cultural elements in our movies. Okay, Dungeons and Dragons, you have lawful good, chaotic evil. Like there's a quasi Christian undertone to that kind of thing. I mean, look, quasi Christian, straight up Christian. In Dungeons and Dragons, there's demons and angels. I mean, come on. You could be a celestial or a tiefling. I mean, it's just how much more. It's like clearly these Christian elements to it.
So
And they think that this. Do they think that their reasoning abilities just transcend their cultural history?
yeah.
What's going on there? So
Well,
it's
I
not
have a
even
question about
just
that for you.
biological evolution; it's culture too.
So I know that you think that many cultures don't even have like a moral conventional distinction that like is real, but I do a little bit wonder about that. Like, so suppose you have this culture that doesn't have a moral conventional distinction, and you show them the king, and they have this like strong norm about like you don't kill the king, and then they have some norm about like maybe you shouldn't skip on Thursdays, but it's like a pretty minor thing, and then I say, what I'm going to do to your king is I'm going to fucking cut his fingers off. I'm going to shove him in his eyeballs and shove it up his ass. And then they'd be like, no, don't do that to our king. And so they would probably have a sense of a spectrum of importance of norms. Even if they didn't have a moral conventional norm, they would still probably have a relative importance of norms, which then you go, okay, but like suppose me and you disagreed about torturing the king. Like I would be curious to do some experimental philosophy on, even if they don't have the concept of moral versus conventional, whether you could still get some of these realist intuitions off the ground for very important norms for them. You know what I mean?
You're saying realist intuitions, but first of all, dial back the extremeness of the examples, please, just a little bit. That was a bit much.
Sorry.
But no, it's all good. So I take the the moral conventional stuff has to do with authority independence, generalizability, what is justified in terms of on normative grounds. I take that to be fairly distal. It might superficially appear to have something to do with stance independence, but I don't take any of that to be an indication that people are moral realists. Are you taking it that way?
I guess so. I was taking conventional norms to be sort of things that we sort of arbitrarily agree on, and I thought of as the non-conventional norms to be the things that are like actually matter, actually real, like aren't just things that we arbitrarily agree on. So I was sort of taking it as sort of a like stance independent versus stance dependent. I was mapping it onto that a little bit, but I can see.
Yeah. So I don't think that they do map onto one another, but I don't take that to be immediately obvious why that's the case. I do have a supplemental section in my dissertation where I wrote a short little essay on why the moral conventional distinction, even if it held within a particular population, is not a good piece of evidence that those people are moral realists. So basically, generalizability, I could just go through them. So the standard traditional features there were four, and one was dropped because it was too inconsistent. So the four were how serious the violation was. That's the one that was dropped. So basically, like, is it really bad or just not that bad? So, okay, let me take a step back. So the moral conventional distinction has to do with a reliable, early emerging faculty for reliably distinguishing uh, paradigmatic moral violations from paradigmatic social conventional violations. So paradigmatic moral violation would be like hitting someone, stealing something, doing something harmful or unfair, or violating someone's rights. So taking something that's not yours. Stereotypical social conventional violation would be like doing something that is like against norms, like wearing a weird outfit. Like if I dressed like a carrot and went to work, that would be weird. Burping where you're not supposed to burp, failing to open the door for somebody, it wouldn't be considered immoral. Someone would go, that's rude. They wouldn't say you're evil or you're a bad person. You're kind of a jerk. They can blur under certain circumstances, but that they might blur when like both are in force in a particular situation. In any case, there are these like relatively distinct violations that fall into either category. So what these researchers did, and Sam, I know you know all this, but I'm just saying this for the audience's benefit. What these researchers did is they took children and they said, okay, well, take something like pulling someone's hair on the playground or shoving someone off the swing. If the teacher said that was okay, or like the principal or the local leader, whoever's in charge, or if they said that's okay, would it be okay? And then children will tend to say no. But if it's like, okay, well, you're not supposed to get up and run around during story time. If the teacher said it's okay to get up and run around, would it be okay? Then they say yes. And so certain rules, authorities can override them, and other rules they can't override them. But that doesn't logically entail that the rules are stance independently true. So they could still be stance dependent or stance independent. Um, it just may be that certain sorts of rules are not the sorts of things that like a local authority can just override them on a whim. That could be the case with rules that would be social conventional violations. And even if someone does think that's a violation with respect to moral rules, it doesn't follow that therefore the rules are true independent of the goal standards or values of individuals. So sometimes people may make the mistake of thinking that um, if this isn't dependent on an authority or an individual in the society, that therefore it stands independent. But a person could, okay, take me for instance. I'm an anti-realist.
Yeah.
Do I think that it would be okay to torture people if, like, the mayor said it was okay to torture people? No. What
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
the president? Nope. What if Congress, what if the US government passed a bill, they add some new amendment that says it's okay to torture people? I'm
Yeah.
still against it. I still think it's wrong. So there's no authorities in the world that can change the rules because the rules are dependent on my values. So
Sure.
so they're not authority dependent on my view, but I'm still an anti-realist. So you see, it's
Yeah.
logically it doesn't follow.
Yeah.
So could it correlate with endorsement of realism? Maybe, but the problem is, let's say it may correlate. Where's the evidence for that? Like, we
Yeah.
don't just get to assume this thing looks similar to this other thing, so the other thing is a fact. See what I'm
And
saying?
and you don't think humans have a sort of moral intuitions? You think they have sort of normativity intuitions that are sort of more basal than moral intuitions? Can you flesh out what that exactly means?
Well,
At least that's what I've heard you say in the past. I'm not sure if you still believe that.
yeah, so I think that all human societies have norms, but I don't think all human societies have moral norms, provided that we are clear about what we mean by a moral norm. So you could give a sort of external operational definition of a moral norm. By that, what I mean is you say, okay, by a moral norm, I mean norms that promote pro-social behavior and optimize for cooperation and minimize conflict within a social group. If that's what you mean by moral norms, all societies have moral norms. Obviously, every human society that's ever existed has norms. Like, if you go in any society that's ever existed, they're going to have some kind of rules for how people treat one another that are going to fall within the ambit of rules that optimize for cooperation.
Okay.
Even if it's like, hey, if we get in a fight, we're going to have a duel to the death or something like that. That's still a rule for optimizing cooperation. It might minimize it escalating into a broader conflict, something like
Sure.
that. You and
Sure.
I might think that that's wrong, but it's still a rule for coordinating activity. So that's an external definition. An internal definition would be one where is it conceptualized as moral by
Yeah.
the beings engaged in it? So within our society, we call some things moral. We don't call other things moral. Do all societies have cognate terms that map onto our term for moral? The answer to that already, I can tell you, is no. They don't all have cognate terms. And so you might say, okay, well, you don't have to go by the strict lexical hypothesis that if they don't have terms for it, they don't have the concept for it. That doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily follow. So then you would have to do empirical research to see, do they distinguish normative domains from one another? Do they box and categorize things? Think of it the way that we draw a distinction between cats and dogs, whales and fish. Like, do they draw distinctions
Yeah.
in the same way that we do? The problem is that requires some type of operationalization, and the moral conventional distinction would be one way of testing that. That way is not universal. Some societies do not draw the moral conventional distinction, or they draw it differently than the way they do in other societies. So that one doesn't work. So then the question is, is there one that does work? And I haven't seen one. So as long as you're clear about what you mean by moral, there's a sense in which I don't think all societies have moral norms, and then a sense in which they all trivially have moral norms. Does
Okay.
that help clarify?
Totally clarifies it. I'm going to give you some quotes about morality and tell me, so here's what John Haidt says. Moral systems are interlocking sets of values, practices, institutions, and evolved psychological mechanisms that work together to suppress or regulate selfishness and make social life possible. So do you think all societies have that? I can say it again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no. So no,
Yeah.
I actually know the quote because I teach a moral psychology class and I give them that quote. I think it's a pretty good definition of morality.
Fons de Waal says, for me, the moral system is one that resolves the tension between the individual and group interests in a way that seems best for the most members of the group, hence promotes a give and take. That's less good than Height's, but it sort of kind of gets at similar considerations. I'm gonna get water, I can hear you.
Yeah. So part of the reason I don't think that's as good is because historically there may have been population with sufficient hierarchical decisions that at least some of the moral norms or the norms in operation are for the benefit of somebody in a position of power. So take like a Spartan society where I believe a majority of the population were slaves. So whatever moral norms they had would be in the interests of the Spartans, not in the interests of the slaves. So it wouldn't be for the majority of the society because like the moral norms imposed on that society would be to the benefit of whoever's in a position of power. So yeah, that second one I would have issues with.
Yeah.
But the first one is pretty good.
Yeah.
One of the things I really like about that definition is it captures, like, this is part of why I revolt so much at someone saying, if you're an anti-realist, you don't think morality is real. Like, I don't just do philosophy, I do moral psychology, and I study morality as an empirical phenomenon. And like the idea that there isn't like moral judgment and moral institutions. And like, can you go through the definition again? There's like so many facets of it that are obviously real.
Interlocking sets of values, practices, institutions, and evolved psychological mechanisms.
We clearly have all of those.
Yeah.
So like and it's what's really interesting is it's a whole bunch of these different types of phenomena that are all dynamically interactive with one another, and it constantly modifying and augmenting in response to cultural changes. And then you've got gene culture coevolution. So culture is shaping the underlying genetics of our shared human psychology. The genes are shaping and influencing the way culture manifests. So you've got this really complicated, interesting, dynamic phenomena going on that are all well worth studying and can readily fall within the ambit of what we could call morality. There's an open question, just like with moral realism, whether we should drop the term morality to refer to all of this. I don't know the answer to that question. One thing that I have sometimes posed about Haidt's moral foundations is, if these are all semi-autonomous, biologically prepared psychological subsystems, if they're all like semi-modular, what unifies them all to make them all moral systems? Now, he might say that they all function to facilitate cooperation and do some of the other things. Do all moral norms promote cooperation? Do they all resolve the tension between selfishness and like the selfish drives of the individual in the society? I don't know that they all do. What do you think?
I don't know. So we have like disgust considerations, and we have respect considerations, and we have fairness considerations, and we have harm considerations. I don't know. I think a lot of the disgust stuff is not, in fact, optimized for like promoting cooperation. I think it's just sort of like a byproduct. Like, I think that like the fact that we like associate goodness with like cleanliness, like that we think that like a godly being would be a clean thing, I think that's just like a byproduct of our psychology and not something that was like optimized by natural selection to be like a maximally good cooperation incentivizing device. Like it feels more like
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking of stuff like religion can lead to some sort of like runaway pathological moralization of certain activities. What about societies that just get way too into like animal sacrifice and people are starving and they're still sacrificing animals? Is that really benefiting the society of the individuals? Like, I'm not so sure. Or societies where they everybody has this, they're paranoid of everybody else being like a sorcerer and they kill one another. And they moralize that. They think it's morally obligatory.
Fuck you, you fucking sorcerer. Yeah.
Right. Like, is that it's not benefiting them?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not being imaginative enough in thinking about how it could benefit them, but I don't want to try to sustain the view that morality must always achieve these outcomes or is optimized for achieving the outcomes in some with like a bunch of just so stories.
Yeah. So, something that when you said that, it made me think of is like there seems to be a lot of times when a society you get like one group of individuals that's very cooperative within itself, but incredibly uncooperative to outsiders. So you got that like with Assyria when they were like cutting the skins off of their enemies during their war campaigns, or you have like Nazis attacking everyone and killing everyone that's not a fucking Aryan, or you have the Spartans that are just enslaving all the helots or whatever they're called, and like there is a sense in which they have like these interlocking sets of norms that are promoting selflessness for themselves, but like they're clearly not. I mean, there is something pathological about it because they like they're hurting all these other people, but B, like people around them hate them and try to destroy them. Like it's not a coincidence that Nineveh got destroyed, like that the Assyrians were destroyed when the Medians and the fucking Babylonians were like, fuck Nineveh, fuck the Assyrians, we're gonna destroy you. Or what the Allies did to the Nazis and just like had the Nuremberg trials and just fucking killed them. Like there is a real sense in which this is a dumb strategy to like go full in on this like tiny group moral optimization to the expense of everyone else. Like unless you're the most powerful, like unless you have this like alien god technology, there is something dumb about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Have you read Josh Green's Moral Tribes?
Yeah, it's been a while though.
Yeah, I know. I don't hear from Josh Green anymore. He used to have this like I don't know. But that book does a good job of drawing that distinction between a kind of morality which governs the standards within a group and a kind of meta morality which governs standards between groups. Maybe there's some parallels between what you're suggesting with this game theoretic stuff. Although
Yeah,
just proposes utilitarianism
yeah.
as like
I
the
mean,
common currency.
I mean, I think the common currency is still the like what I said about the what should we do. So if you know all the Assyrians and all the Medians and the Babylonians could get together and sort of talk about what they were trying to optimize, like there is an optimal way to get it. And then if the Median said, "Well, I know that there's this harmonious way we could interact, but I don't care about your values. I'm going to try to destroy you." That's no different than me saying, like, "Yes, there's an optimal way that me and you could interact." Where we could mutually beneficial, and then say, but I don't care about that. I'm going to try to like kill you and take your stuff and like, you know, like stab you, tell your wife. Like it doesn't seem any different to me. Like there's the sort of optimal way we could interact, and then there's the, oh yeah, you just didn't want to do that. Okay, well then I guess we're fighting then.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of what we're discussing now, just to me, it brings to mind how much I focus on negative stuff. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing, but I tend to focus on the specific views that I think are wrong, almost to the exclusion of everything else. And one moment, I had a super scratchy throat. I started coughing. I focus so much on why non-naturalist moral realists are wrong that I don't really make any sort of positive contributions. But there's so much once you start looking at the world empirically, once you start looking at how like human societies and human history and human culture, and you bring in all of these aspects of what people are like and what our psychology is like, and then you turn your moral gaze towards these practical questions. How can we get along better? What if we encountered aliens? How would we get along with them? How would we get along with AI? There's all these practical questions that I know some philosophers are working on them, but if we could get that magnetic pull of these rationalistically inclined approaches to philosophy out of people's hands, like just rip the magnet away and direct their attention towards more practical endeavors, I feel like philosophy would be it, so much more productive and valuable, and it could contribute in so many important ways. I feel like it sometimes does, but for me, it's a bit like if there were doctors here and there saving people and doing surgeries and doing good work, but then like hospitals, like, I don't know, 40, 50, 70, I don't know the percentage, where it's just like straight up just doing like alchemy and they were like did four humors and they were just doing nonsense and people were dying left and right. And I'm like, hey, I know you want to propose that we like go do surgery properly. I want to talk about the people doing the alchemy. Can we please get them to stop doing that?
Yeah.
And I feel like both of these approaches need to work in tandem. But you see where I'm coming from, how I
Yeah.
focus on the negative stuff. And then when you
Yeah.
talk about the positive stuff, I'm like, there's so much interesting stuff to talk about here. And I never talk about it because I'm so focused on pointing out all the alchemists.
Yeah. I mean, it is strange how few people seem to understand your very basic point about the put the shoe, like that there's something very weird about saying that like you just should do it and you're not relative to some goal or like there's something weird and almost ungrammatical about it. Like I don't know. It seems like some philosophers are like don't take the pull of that or something. Yeah, I don't know.
They don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
I call it the unintelligibility thesis. And it's specifically the view that certain conceptions like irreducible normativity and certain views about like external reasons, I think that they are literally meaningless. I don't think and I get a lot of strange pushback about this. So, some of the more common pushback is nobody thinks this way. Okay, I give exactly zero shits how many people think this way. I don't care. So I'm the first one. Yay, give me a Nobel Prize then. What matters for a viewer, it's merits. I think people are reasoning that nobody thinks this way because it's stupid, but you can't conclude it's stupid because nobody thinks this way. What kind of? I mean, that's stupid. If you're going to call a view stupid, thinking, hey, nobody thinks this, so it's probably wrong. Just imagine we thought that way about every new idea that was proposed. So someone comes along and they're like, hey, I discovered a new planet. And someone goes, but nobody thinks there's a planet there. So that's stupid. And you're like, but I have evidence. And they're like, yeah, but we already don't think there's a planet there. And it's all of us versus just one view. Don't be so arrogant. Like, how it's obviously silly in that case, but like, hear me out, and consider the view on its own merits. So you get that. The other thing is people immediately going, well, what's your account of meaning? Give me an account of meaning. Explain what meaning is to me. Now, early on, I didn't have an account of meaning. And so I might say, look, you guys get to appeal to stuff being obvious. How come I can't do that? I think it's obviously meaningless. And then I'll give analogies and descriptions and metaphors that try to ostensibly point at stuff that I consider meaningless. And none of that seemed to work very well. So apparently it's okay for other people to say things are obvious, but it's not okay for me to say it's obvious because I'm outnumbered or something, I guess. But like one of the examples that I would always point to is the Jabberwocky, like 'twas brillig in the slithy toves, de gyring gimble in the wabe. It's obviously nonsense. And I'd say, okay, so if I said, hey, it's a stance independent fact that you ought to gyre and gimble in the wabe, am I not talking nonsense? Like, if gyre and gimble in the wabe isn't nonsense, what do you think is nonsense? Like, it's literally called a nonsense poem. That's that's like the name for it. So you could just make up words that sound superficially like English. You could say I'm not going to try to make something up because it might end up sound really horrible or something. But you get the idea, gyring gimble in the wave. So I'd point to that. That's not convincing to people. So, but here's what I find really weird about this. There's this like asymmetric demand that I have to give super thorough and not just thorough. I can't just say, here's my perspective on meaning, the pragmatic at a pragmatic account of meaning. I have to give one that's compelling, or I could fuck off. Like, that's how people treat me. But they don't have to say anything compelling for the view that's already there. So basically, okay, so imagine there's a group of people, and the people say, hey, we have Zorplars, and we all agree that we have Zorplars, and Zorplars entail that we're right about stuff. And then I come along and I go, what is a Zorplar? And they're like, we can't tell you. You either know what it is or you don't know. And if you don't know, maybe there's something wrong with you. But we know what Zorplars are. We're experts on Zorplarism or something. Now, under those circumstances, I'm the one questioning what they mean, and they're saying we can't tell you, and it's kind of a mistake for you to even ask. It's the kind of thing that's inexplicable. It's kind of inappropriate for you to ask us to explain what we mean by it. It's the sort of thing that can't be explained. That's one of its properties. It's inexplicable. Now, I think it's a red flag that there's this group of people that are using a term and they can't explain what it means, and then I get a bunch of shit for that by saying, hey, I think it's a red flag. They can't explain what they mean. Now, let's say you say, okay, well, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe, Lance, you need to shut up and go think about like these concepts and try to figure them out or something. Why don't they then turn to those people and go, okay, so we got Lance out of here. What do you mean? What are you talking about? How does this work? And if they say stuff like, I can't tell you, the concepts are unanalyzable and inexplicable, why don't people then press them on that? Well, how did you figure out that these concepts were unanalyzable and inexplicable? Because you could explain what tables and trees and rocks and numbers are. Why can't you explain what these concepts are, and what criteria do you use to distinguish effable terms from ineffable terms? So like, what do they have standards or criteria? How do they acquire the concepts? If they can't communicate the meaning of the concepts, how did they acquire them in the first place? So did they have an account of concept acquisition? Like, I'm supposed to give an account, but where is their account of concept acquisition? Where is their account of meaning? Where is their account of how you distinguish analyzable from unanalyzable concepts? And I think in all these cases, they would just say it's intuitive, it's intuitive, it's intuitive. They're not going to have, in many cases, robust standards or criteria. The thing is, if they did, how come nobody has ever directed me to it? Where is it? Because, I've looked at people say, go read Scanlon, go read Parfait. It's unhelpful. It's in a lot of cases, it's attempts at ostension via thought experiments where the thought experiment doesn't work. So for me at least, so I get like Future Tuesday indifference. I don't acquire the concept that way. Or it's just people just saying it's unanalyzable, and they don't say much more than that. Now, the last point I'll make about this, because I know I've said a bunch of stuff here, is that I don't know if I read this before or after I started saying this, but there's a passage, I think it's in page 272 of volume 2 of Parfit's On What Matters, where he's talking about his exchanges with Bernard Williams, and Bernard Williams explicitly says, I don't think these concepts are intelligible. Like, I don't think they make any sense. And Parfit very explicitly says, look, I can't tell you what an external reason is. I've said it's something that counts in favor of an action, but what I mean by counts in favor is just means you have a reason to do it. Like, it's just circular, and I don't have a way of breaking out of that circle. So
Yeah.
he seems to recognize that he's in a situation of circularity. Why doesn't what so only Bernard Williams has an issue with that? Nobody else has taken an issue with that for the past few decades? Why? Why am I
Yeah.
the only one? Where is everybody else? I don't know. I said a lot there, but what's going on here?
Yeah, I hear you. A couple of things. One is I want to say my account of meaning is I'm like the Mr. Polysemy. I think that concepts are these blurry Wittgensteinian family resemblance things. And then whenever I say like, hey, this is a good account of this concept, I'm never saying this is capturing the fucking necessary and sufficient conditions. I'm saying, listen, this is going to capture some of the fuzz. There are pragmatic reasons why we should talk this way and not that way. A lot of people are going to understand it. It's got a clear understanding, and it's always going to be sort of like at the end of the day, I'm not trying to give you necessary and sufficient conditions. I'm just trying to give you a concept that captures a lot of our intuitions, that is has sort of other pragmatic reasons why you'd want to use it. And so I am annoyed at how much philosophers don't acknowledge the fuzzy nature of our concepts. That's one thing. Another thing is the reasons thing. So when I talk about there is something stupid about people not cooperating in the aliens going into the portal and not being able to one-shot cooperate in the position law. They're not able to like mutually understand that they would both be better off if they cooperated and like get that off the ground. That is, I'm not saying it's just intrinsically reason giving that I'm not saying like some sort of semantic circular thing about I'm saying that like, hey, there is this equilibrium. If you can't get to the equilibrium, you're a fucking dumbass. It's not, it's not semantically unanalyzable. I'm saying there's like specific equilibriums that it would be better if agents could get to. That's what I mean by there's some sort of quasi external reason. It's not actually totally external. I'm just there's a real equilibrium here. We could be there. So yeah, I do find it annoying to be like, yes, there's just a reason. I can't analyze it. No, the reason is there's an equilibrium that really exists in the world. We could be in that equilibrium. Why can't we get there? Okay, so that's
yeah. Yours is still cashed out in terms of values, though. Yeah. So not everybody that believes in external reasons thinks that they are unanalyzable, though. There is a literature of people saying that external reasons are evidence that you should do the thing. I think there's what's the other account? Yeah, I don't remember the other one off the top of my head, but there are people that purport to provide analyses of reasons. At a superficial glance, I haven't dug into this too much. They do look like they're just expanding the circle of mutually interdefining terms by just adding another link in the chain. And so, okay, the reasons are evidence for why I should do the thing. Okay, but what do you mean by should? So I should do it independent of my goals or values. Why? Well, because you have a reason. Okay, so what does it mean to have a reason? Well, there's evidence that you should do it. That's still unhelpful to me. If it's not conducive to my goals and interests, what does it mean to say there's evidence that I should do it?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's evidence that I ought to do a thing that doesn't promote my goals. Why would I want to do that? Why?
Yeah.
I still don't. So for me, I really think more anti-realists should push this point against realists, which is if there were facts about what I should do that were not conducive to my goals and interests, I wouldn't even simply ask the question, why should I do them? I'd ask the question, how could I do them? Like, imagine it's a fact that you should do something that's completely inconsistent with your goals and values. Could you be motivated to do it?
Yeah.
Unless you had an antecedent desire to comply with whatever the facts were independent of them comporting with.
Yeah.
Let's say you're committed to whatever the moral facts are, I'm going to comply with them. And if it turns out that they're stuff like, skin your children alive, you're like, well, kind of makes me sick, but I guess I got to do it. But what if you just don't have that desire? And now someone goes, here's the moral facts. Now what?
Yeah.
Now what do I do with those facts? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And so it's a question I think people should pose to moral realists more, which is, why do you care if there's moral facts? And what's frustrating is when I've asked this question, sometimes people respond with, that's the question. Why are you asking me that? I mean, they're true. They're true. They're true. I'm not asking you that. And it's not, I'm not saying if there were moral facts, you should care about them. You don't care about them, so there's no moral, or you wouldn't care about them, so there's no moral facts. I'm not trying to make a deductive argument. I'm just asking him, why do you care? And I don't think I've ever gotten a good answer to this. Why do they care? Whether so, what you're describing is a scenario where, hey, if you and I could cooperate, I get all the things that I want to the greatest amount I could foreseeably obtain. But what about on their view? So complying with the moral realism, I mean, like consistently failing to get what I want all the time. What? Why would I do that?
Yeah.
It seems weird, right?
Yeah, in my account, I'm not necessarily saying that you're maximally getting what you want, because if you were omniscient, like there's no sense in which you should take into consideration like so there is a sense in which I'm saying, like, listen, I'm not saying that this maximizes exactly what you want, but this does maximize you both getting what you want, and you both, like, if you could get this off the ground, it would be better for both of you. Like, this is like a thing that would like maximally get both of your goals. You don't have to fight about it. You're both like nicely getting what you like, lots of what you want, and you have no desire to fight because you already know that this is like the optimal trade-off between your values. Do you know what I mean? So like, and then
I don't mean getting what like,
yeah.
I don't mean optimizing for getting exactly what you like, maximizing what you want in the absence of anybody else. I mean, maximizing what you would want conditional on the fact that you're going to come into conflict with others. So the scenario, like a really simple scenario would be, there is a cake, there's a person that's equally strong as me, and they are equally want to eat the cake as me. Yeah. There's an obvious optimal solution. We cut the cake in half. That's the obvious solution to that. There is another one. We flip a coin. Whoever wins the flip gets the whole cake. There's a few other solutions that we might agree to, rather than the alternative, which is we punch the shit out of each other, and then whoever wins gets the cake. And assuming we don't want to be bloody and have missing teeth and be in pain. Like, I mean, so
there's the pragmatic consideration of, if we didn't flip the coin, we would have to fight. But then there's also the like veil of ignorance consideration of, like, if we didn't know who we were, like the flip a coin thing would be nice, because you're probably going to get some cake. You don't have to, like, you don't know if you're going to be this weaker one and gets killed. You know what I mean? So like, there's a sense in which there's some justification independent of the more immediate pragmatic considerations. Just there's something that's intrinsic to whatever, you understand. But
it's tied to my values.
Yeah, like, it's absolutely tied to your values.
On non-naturalist moral realism, there's no guarantee that I'm going to care at all what these facts are. The facts could be really weird stuff. Like I pointed out to people, it could be stuff like scream at tables all day. What's really silly is another reaction I got to that is, no, it couldn't be screaming at tables all day because the moral facts would be necessary. Okay, so it could be necessary for you to scream at tables all day. Like you can't get it, because I'm just going to point to the epistemic possibility that it could be otherwise. So the only way out of that is if they say it's not even an epistemic possibility. So now what are they claiming, that they have infallible access?
Infallible knowledge
to the facts? Okay. Come on. So not only do you have access, you have infallible access. Bullshit. I don't buy that for a minute. So no, it remains a possibility that you would be obligated to scream at tables all day. The only thing you could do is you eat, sleep, and do everything you can, and just you scream at tables all day. Why would you do that?
Yeah. By the way, sorry, go on.
It would be cool to create a quasi. Well, it wouldn't be cool. It'd be really awful. But like we talked about these like semi-realist stuff. Like, what if you were in a universe where like it was a simulation and we were engineered to have ethical intuitions, and they all pointed towards scream at tables all day, but nobody actually wanted to do that? Like, what would that? I would want to see what would happen in a world like that. I wouldn't, because it would cause a lot of suffering. But like a world where we make them all pea zombies and they're not conscious. Like, so you have all these philosophers, and they get better and better at philosophy after like 2,000 years, and then they're like, shit, it's so obvious we should scream at tables all day, but I really don't want to do that. Like, what would they do? What do you think they would do?
I mean, I think that you are right that you can't really be motivated to do things that are not in line with your values. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, like, though I did hear something funny, which is this lady, she's not very intelligent, but she was very creative. And she was like, listen, these people, these ancient religions, they were constantly sacrificing these animals to the gods. maybe these gods just want animals. Like, like, and then she was kind of like saying that, like, maybe what we should be doing is burning these animals because it seems like that's what lots of people were thinking they wanted. Maybe they were right. And I was like, that's such a creative view on what the moral facts are, or not the moral facts, like what the gods want.
Yeah, you could create one of those charts. Like you could show the increase in climate change is directly correlated with the decline in animal sacrifice. So we better get back to it.
We gotta sacrifice these
Yeah,
animals.
but that's another thing that would be really funny is, we talked about the counterfactual thing earlier. So like Christianity doesn't become the dominant religion. It's still paganism or whatever. Like right now it would be like 2025, the start of the year. And all these pagan normative moral philosophers would be talking about like should you sacrifice 3 goats or 1 cow? Like what's worth more? Like you would have all these arguments about how to do animal sacrifice properly. Like, is it better to use a knife or is it better to set them on fire? Like you would have all these principled arguments about like the right kinds of animal sacrifice, and it would all be nonsense. And
Yeah.
it would seem just as obvious to the people doing that it totally made sense. They'd have all these intuitions. Imagine 2,000 years of really well calibrated intuitions about like the relative value of different animals.
Yeah. Like, oh, when you sacrifice a pigeon, like gods don't really care, but you
Right.
sacrifice
Because
like a
like
cow,
someone, God, pigeons are gross, rats. Ugh, you don't sacrifice a rat. But
unless it's a
what would
Tuesday.
be so is it so I'm already thinking, like, how would this work? Like, would it be proportional to the rarity and the size of the animal? Because like, so you could say, okay, like an elephant, it would be better to sacrifice an elephant than a cow, right?
Yeah.
But like, okay, but what if it's like a rare color, like it's a cow with a certain stripe thing that's like really rare, like a white buffalo or something like that, isn't it?
It's more valuable, I think. Yeah. The gods care about
Right.
them
So
more.
if it's like albino animals are more valuable or something, or are they cursed and so it's actually less valuable?
Well, I mean, we just got to ask the gods, By the way,
Like, but okay, does anything count? Like if you sacrifice enough worms, does that count as like,
well,
is there
okay.
commensurate, like, is it 3 million worms are worth 1 cow? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, do they think it's by mass? I suspect that if you sacrifice 500 rabbits and it weighs the same much as a cow, that's worth more than a cow because it was
I
a
think
lot of
so.
effort to wrangle all those bunnies up. You know what I mean?
So is it effort of acquisition? So are animals caught in the wild worth more than animals bred in captivity? Like we could so it's like difficulty of acquisition, rarity,
Value
um,
of it, like how price it.
practical value to society. So like cows are more valuable than rabbits, so that would count in favor of the cow. Um, yeah, like the danger of the animal, presumably sacrificing like a tiger is worth more than
A cow,
like
yeah,
this. There
maybe.
would be some really sick and demented stuff going into this.
Yeah. I mean, I think what would actually happen, like factually, in this world would be there would be some there would be these intuitions about like an elephant's worth more than a cow, and then some priest would like write it down. You know what I mean? These intuitions, and then that would be sacralized, like that list. They'd be like, oh, the list came from the gods, and then instead of having like intuitions on the object level about like cow versus goat, 3 goats versus a cow, they would probably just have arguments about like the text, like, well, this great man said this thing, you know what I mean, as opposed to always cashing it out on their own object level. I like literally think that's what would in fact happen. Not that we can have
Right, but there
technology.
would be reformers that are like,
Yeah,
but that guy, he wasn't anointed properly in the temple, and so his judgments don't count. And this other person was anointed, even though they were never officially sanctioned as a priest, and they say it's actually 4 goats. So, like, you would have shit like that going on. Kind of like there's like still people that aren't there still people that like claim they're the real pope.
I mean, the actual Pope claims he's the Pope. I don't know if other people
Yeah, but
besides him
like,
are.
aren't there like claimants?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
I know there were in the past. I don't know how many people are claiming to be the pope right
I'm
now.
sure there's more than one person that claims to be the Pope right now.
Right, I'm sure there are, but I don't know how many of them are just like completely out of their minds, or how many. Because like I recall a guy that said like technically this like decision on how to choose the pope violated some rule, and so they didn't follow the rules, but I kept following the rules, so I count as the pope because I'm the only official candidate or something. It was something real weird like that.
Yeah.
So you get all those factional disputes, but you know it does make me wonder a few things, which is like how how much does an idea have to be repeated over generation after generation for it to become so internalized that it feels to you like it's some sort of intuition that you're having about what's true? rather than it's just something you picked up from your culture.
Yeah, just sort of like culturally contingent, whatever. But I mean, even you and I seem to have the intuition about which animals are more valuable than other animals. We just don't think gods exist and care about animals. But like a lot of these things are cashed out in our shared psychology. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
we understand that, elephants seem more valuable than worms, even if we don't believe in gods or think sacrifices matter. So I think I think you are more believing in cultural contingency on human psychology than I do. I think I'm more of an evolutionary biology like kind of guy. Like for sure, I understand that if I was raised as a caveman, I would have I'd be a very radically different person. I'd have radically different understandings of the world and values. But I also think that like things like lust. I think there'd be some deep commonalities in me and this guy's values, even
I don't
if
disagree with that.
yeah, like
Part of the thing though is that we're forgetting a third factor here. Maybe I just forgot about it. So it's not just that culture shapes how we think and biology shape how we think, and I do think that they are interactive with one another. It's not like they're just independent influences. Like the whole is it nature or nurture? That's a goofy dichotomy. There's
yeah,
also the fact that so long as we're in a shared environment, there's going to be convergence in the kinds of conclusions we arrive at, the norms we devise, the institutions. Like people in dry environments are going to put out buckets to collect water on the rare occasions when it rains. People that are near large bodies of water are going to figure out how to build boats. People are going to converge on similar practices and norms simply because we happen to be in similar types of environments. So that's not evolutionary biology, nor is it culture. It's
yeah,
just people adapting to the same circumstances.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
is it, did we like, okay, different parts of the world, did people have to pass down burning firewood? No.
No, yeah, yeah,
Firewood
yeah,
burns, so people figure out how to burn it. They don't have to learn
yeah,
that from one another.
yeah.
I do wonder about language. Like, when exactly did languages emerge? How quickly did they emerge? And what is the relationship between the languages spoken on Earth? Like, are they all descended from one original language, or did language arise independently in different locations? I don't know the answer. I don't study
I'm
this
not sure
stuff.
if
I don't know
linguists
the
know the
answer.
answer to that question. I At least I don't have a cached memory that they do. I mean, it is odd that like there seems to be like only like 5 or 6 great language families. You know what I mean? Like there's like the Proto-Indo-European. There's the like
But you do get
the
ones that stand out. So there's like Basque,
Basque.
there's
Yeah,
Pitaha.
yeah, yeah,
There
yeah.
are a few languages that are not closely
A little
related to the languages
isolates.
around
Yeah,
them.
yeah. They're a lot.
Yeah, but like, okay, so Basque. So what happened when like the Romans went into Spain? So they killed almost everybody and presumably Romanized the hell out of them, and a lot of people spoke Latin, and then we have the vulgar Latin, and everything broke down after the fall of the Roman Empire and blah blah blah. But like, did that region were they just like nah? No, like what exactly happened? Like I'm under the like they are more geographically isolated, right? Like it's more mountainous, and maybe that helped.
Yeah, I have no idea about Basques. I've
Okay,
never
I don't
looked
know.
into
I don't know,
history.
but
Yeah,
some of these, but the other interesting thing is that like small language, there's like places in Europe where it's like what, like Gascon or something. There's like like little local languages that populations speak, and they might speak that way at home, even if they read the newspaper or watch the news in like Spanish or Italian or French, but they do have a local language. Uh, and a lot of those are getting squeezed out and dying with modern globalization, like the internet and everything is killing those off. I recently saw a video where there was a small population that has continuously spoke German in Texas since they came over as original German settlers, and the dialect has changed. But like, it's one town where they speak a local dialect. What? That's
yeah.
wild. But yeah, I do wonder if you had looked at the world 1,000 years ago, how distinct all the languages would be. And like I'm guessing the answer is super duper distinct, because like think of like New Guinea, where there's so many distinct and
So many
different languages.
languages, and they don't agree on like subject object verb versus subject verb object. They don't agree on like the order in which things there's so much variation on like things that I would have expected there to be like some basic grammatical similar. I mean, maybe there's some structure, like maybe they have some understanding of like there's things, and then those things have properties, and then and then things can do things. Like they might have like some basic understanding of like noun, verb, adjective, or something like that. But like how they interrelate them and what things you have to say, like you need like articles and assign genders to them. Like it is kind of wild that how much variation there is there.
Yeah, and so many of them have so many of these languages. So, and it's so interesting to learn about linguistic differences. And I worry that Chomsky and universal grammar and it's all basically the same underlying structure. I don't know if that's like there's just been this vibe in linguistics that comparative linguistics and cataloging and understanding all these languages in the world is not that critical. One, I want to know about these languages just because it's in like I just find it interesting. I just every time I hear about a language with different features from English, I'm like, hell yeah, that's cool. But it's also, cultures manifest in part through the language that if you and I like studied, like we have information on how people spoke classical Latin, we could read that and study it, and I could be like, they said awe, not ave, or whatever. Like we could study that and talk a little bit like ancient Latin, but there's going to be features of the culture that manifested through the language that we have no access to anymore because the culture's gone.
Yeah.
And like preserving languages is in a way like even if the languages are going to die out, we can get information. It just seems like it's fascinating and interesting and really, really, really cool. And it worries me that there aren't really massive collective efforts to preserve and chronicle the languages out there, both in the interests of the communities that they come from and in the collective interests of humanity and better understanding ourselves. Why isn't that like a bigger project? Because I hear about all these languages dying, and it's like there's 6 speakers left, and nobody's working on trying to protect that or record that or do anything about it. It's weird. It's the same thing when there's like endangered species, and like just people just don't care,
and they just die off. Yeah,
it sucks. It makes me sad.
Yeah, I'm sure you know this, but I find it so interesting that when you have 2 languages come together, they make like this like pidgin language, or this I think it's pidgin language that is like this weird mixture that becomes a Creole, because like the adults make a mixture language that they kind of use to interact with each other, and then the kids learn that mixture language and they add rules to it. They just invent rules for it, and that becomes the full fleshed out Creole. But then usually those Creoles have like less rules because they've had less time to accumulate this sort of arbitrary, like, it seems like both with languages and culture, like the longer you have in isolation, the more time you have to accumulate like little barnacles, like little arbitrary things that like just accrue that like, and like, it's very interesting that like, Christianity, when Jesus came, a lot of the barnacles of Judaism kind of were like washed away. When Buddhism came, a lot of the barnacles of Hinduism came away. So both in languages and in culture, there seems to be these events where there's like getting rid of the barnacles and a new thing is forming, and then that itself forms barnacles, and I find that very interesting.
It mirrors in some ways our institution. So you start like, okay, when university started, you had some professors that some of them did administrative stuff, you got students, and then these days there's so much administration and like institutions and institutions and institutions, and like it builds up, and there's like this accretion of institutional glut. Some of it's good, some of it might be superfluous, but it could probably be pared down and rendered more efficient than it is. And it's the same thing with governments. We keep like, how many different like government institutions are there today? It's not just the FBI. There's like every 3-letter term for like all these different organizations and institutions. And again, not saying whether that's necessarily good or bad, that's a separate dispute, but like they build up and they build up and they build up. And then there's like a cleansing when a new nation forms or something like that. There's this interesting way society, like this is mirrored in so many different domains.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something's going on there. Yeah, I don't know anything about this stuff, so now we're just in like
speculation mode.
Speculation mode. Oh, this reminds me of something I wanted to ask you about. Okay, so because you focus a lot on aesthetics, I don't even know how to frame the question I want to ask about this, but just aliens, aesthetics. What's going to happen there? Like, you see, I don't know what question to ask. Like,
I'm going to run with it. So, okay. So it is very odd that many animals that are in light seem to have some sort of agreement on what forms look good, even though they have no phylogenetic relationship to each other. So what I mean is like me and like a deer, I agree that a deer looks good. I also agree that a praying mantis looks good. I also agree, like, there's lots of things, like me and a praying mantis have no relationship to each other, but I think it looks good. A beetle looks pretty good. Like, but then you go into the ocean where there's no light, and there's like the anglerfish and all these other things that are less phylogenetically far away from us than the insect, but look more disgusting to us. And it almost seems like in the dark, because there's no like selection pressure on looking good, that they just don't select for that. So there's no like sort of sexual selection. And what I suspect is going on is that something like symmetry, things like certain pattern colors are actually good signals of health because they're hard to fake signals. So like, yes, I've made a perfectly symmetrical thing with a regular pattern. I am healthy. That's a hard to fake signal. The things in the bottom of the ocean, they don't need to. They can't use that as a symbol, so they don't. So that is not selected for. So, and then whether an alien. Okay, so I'm saying that if there's aliens and they're in visible light, that probably through evolutionary biology, they will also notice that things like symmetry and regular patterns are good signals of health. So they might just share our aesthetics. At the same time, I don't think that there are like, I think the way aesthetics work is, I just think humans like certain patterns. Like, I think like a lot of people that are like more into like art, like people that are equally into art want to say like there are these like objective facts about beauty. I just think that like humans like spirals, humans like trees, humans like faces, humans like water, humans like fire, humans like repeated patterns, humans like symmetrical movement, humans like glowing lights, like humans like a light bouncing off. Like there's just certain patterns humans like to look at that are just sort of quirks of our evolved psychology. So it wouldn't surprise me if us and the aliens shared some features of our psychology, if they are invisible, an invisible light thing, that they would share some of our intuitions about what things like good because they're reliable signals of health and stuff like that. But it also wouldn't surprise me if it was just like radically different, that they had starting axioms, that they had other hard to signal patterns that are equally hard to fake, but just aren't the patterns that we are using that are hard to fake. You know what I mean? And so we just like don't find it attractive, even though we understand that it's, that is a hard to fake signal, but we don't, that's just not one of the patterns I like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you know if like I don't know, astrobiologists or like, I don't know what they're xenobiologists, whatever they would be, have speculated on alternative types of hard to fake signals of,
I've
I guess
never
you could
read
say like
anything
genetic
on
elements.
xenoaesthetics. This is all from me just like thinking about it myself. I've never read a paper on xenoaesthetics. It's a really interesting topic, but I've never read anything about it. I don't know if anyone has.
Yeah, I don't know either. Yeah. So do you happen to know if there's any reliable cross-culturally recurring patterns in color preferences among humans? Because I've heard like most people, if you ask them their favorite color, like the modal choice is
Blue.
blue.
Yeah. I know that's true of, I don't know what sample they used. So I don't know if that's
Yeah,
just
neither do I. I
Americans.
don't like.
I
Did
don't know
they
if it's
ask people in New
Americans or
Guinea? Did they ask people in
Americans and
Africa?
your,
Did they ask people?
yeah, I don't know. It would definitely not surprise me if blue, like it wouldn't surprise me that like red is a signal that gives more attention and that blue is a signal that gives calmness because water is blue. So it's unsurprising that we'd find the like water calming because it's one of the basic things we need. Like that
Yeah,
wouldn't
I'm
surprise
wondering
me at
how.
all.
Yeah,
And
like
it wouldn't,
okay, green.
and also,
How are people
and
gonna
also,
react to green?
but hold on, but also blackness because darkness is scary. There can be smilodons in the dark, so that's unsurprising. That would be have sort of some negative affect towards it. But wait, what were you gonna ask me?
If I just give you colors, I bet you could come up with how you expect like a plausible story of how we would expect people to react. So the color I was going
Yeah,
to give you is green.
yeah,
Generally good,
green.
generally bad. How would people react to green?
Well, I would, I mean, there's like puke color green that I
Yeah,
expect humans to not
leaf
like because,
green.
but like leaf green, I expect humans to like just because like we're near nature. Like if you're in the desert and you see a bunch of leafy green shit, it's good evidence that water's there. You know what I mean? So you'd expect humans to like want to go near, like you're in the desert, you're gonna want to go to the green. You know what I mean? Like the ones that like the green doing better than the ones that go towards just sand. Like sand colored things.
Oh my God.
Uh,
It makes me think of these like evolutionary slogans that are answered. It's like, if you don't want to be seen, get in the green. Something stupid like that.
um, but yeah, like people want to unify all the different things humans like because they have a very unevolutionary view on what beauty is. They think beauty comes from God or something like that. And I'm like, no. Humans just like certain patterns. We'll like.
Okay, so here's what. So okay, you mentioned people liking spirals. Like, so we like bilateral symmetry, but radial symmetry looks great too. And I
Yeah,
don't
it's
like
true.
if a human was radially symmetric. That I don't know what that would look like, but I don't think I would like it very much. But why does like a nautilus look really cool?
Yeah. Um. I mean, there could be something like humans like patterns that have sort of mathematically describable structure, like easily mathematical describable structure. That could be just one of the patterns we like, and that's like a separate pattern we like than just liking the color turquoise. You know what I
So is
mean?
it like
Like,
cognitive ease? So if my brain can process the image, then ooh, I like it. It's easy. And if my
yeah.
brain struggles and I'm like, what the hell? So like, what are those images called where there's like stairs going places and they like disappear and they don't go anywhere? You know what I'm talking about? Like the optical illusions.
Like the Necker cubes, like where
It's not a Necker cube. It's like the ones where there's like people walking up and down stairs and it's like a inside of a building,
yeah,
but
like
some of the
Escher.
stairs don't they
That
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, like okay, I don't know how to react to those because there's something aesthetically kind of interesting about them, but they also kind of bother me. What's up with that? Like I'm like annoyed by them. Like what? Or that thing with like the bars and like the bars don't
Yeah,
they don't form something about that is like I'm like looking at it and I'm like I like it, but it pisses me off. What's going on
yeah.
there?
Well, so okay, I think there's some things that are just like that are just we like them just because they're like simple. Like we like turquoise, we like blue, we like pretty face of a young woman. We just like the very simple pleasures. Then there's things like the sublime. Some artists talk about like, holy fuck, that's scary, and like it makes me feel awe. And it's not just like pretty, like the way a flower is pretty. It's like it creates fear and awe, and like there's some beauty in there, but it's also these other emotions. So I think there's like the sublime, and then what I think you're talking about is like intellectually challenging, interesting
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
patterns.
yeah.
And I think that just some humans are going to find puzzles enjoyable, intrinsically enjoyable. Like, oh, like there's something to figure out here, and that's the pleasure is in the puzzle solving. Like, it's not surprising that humans like to solve puzzles. There's a whole industry called making puzzles for people. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
But you mentioned awe. I saw like I think it's like the largest. I can't remember the name. It's like the largest cathedral in the world. What is so I've been in some of these things and I'm all like I'm an atheist and I don't care like as soon as I go in it's like jaw hits the floor and I'm just like whoa like I can't talk like
yeah,
what some of these places are
I
insane
cry.
like
I cry basically every time I go into a cathedral. So yeah, I'm
they're
with
just
you.
so outrageously beautiful
Yeah,
yeah
it's
it's
unbelievable.
upsetting
Yeah,
like I'm
yeah.
just like how is everything not like this all the time like
Yeah.
why
How is
don't
everything on? And also, I look at them and I'm like, oh my god, it makes me feel like I'm connected to other humans because I understand that they share my values because they were able to
right
make
right right
something
right
that's
yeah
so optimized for my values that I'm like, oh my god, you understand me. And then like, oh my god, someone put so much effort into this. That's so
yep.
amazing that humans can put so much effort into things.
You
Yeah,
think of the decades or even centuries that people toiled away on shared values, on shared goals. And then, I hear Christians say, like, what atheists have to compete with that? And I'm kind of like,
got a
I think
point.
they kind of got a point here. They kind of
Yeah,
got
yeah,
a
yeah,
point here.
yeah,
We
yeah,
don't have cathedrals, and that's that. Okay, that counts for Christians. They got
yeah,
cathedrals. We don't
yeah,
have
yeah.
those.
I mean,
And we're not making any. We're not. It's not like we're making some alternative. It's like all these secular things over the past century just make me want to vomit.
yeah, they're terrible. Yeah, I mean, it's awful. The like, I mean, one of my big things I like to rant about is like, why are architects making ugly buildings? Like, how could that have possibly happened? Like, that's ridiculous. They should make buildings we love. Obviously, anything else is fucking stupid. Of course, architects should make buildings we love. And it's not like it's and a lot of like conservatives were like, it must be traditional. It doesn't have to be traditional. There's just some buildings are just obviously more beautiful than others, and it's not like I don't think it's very relative to a culture because I go to the Taj Mahal, I think it's beautiful. I go to the Colosseum, I think it's beautiful. I go to fucking Japan, I see some of these Shinto shrines, I think they're beautiful. Humans generally agree when they're building an awe-inspiring building that looks good. We have pretty similar standards, so it's not that fucking hard, and you can make something new, totally new, but still have these same principles of like repeating patterns, things that create awe, like interesting colors. Like it's to me, it's so bizarre that we got stuck in this equilibrium, and it's like tragic. Like why? Why would we live in
Yeah,
these?
buildings are ugly, houses are ugly, everything interiors are ugly. Why is everything blocky and lumpy and colorless and lifeless and empty and soulless? Like I cringe a little bit at using the term, but not
Yeah.
that much. Not that much. I'll take
Yeah.
a bit of soul if it can counteract the deadness of the aesthetic doldrum that our entire Western civilization is in.
Yeah.
And these buildings crumble away, and people don't care that much. They just don't
Yeah.
care. They're like, oh yeah, it looks nice, whatever, and they go about their business.
Yeah.
And it's the same. And it's the same with art itself. What people just
Yeah.
don't like. There's beautiful art, and people moved away from beauty. They moved towards like, I'm gonna make a point. Like there's like a political message or an
Yeah.
ironic message. I'm gonna make a point. Ha 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 ha. That when did art become about going ha 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 and
Yeah.
giving a middle finger to people, rather than having people go wow.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Like you can make political points in art, but like
Oh sure, I'm not
the
against
artist, but
doing that.
hey artist, what you're better at is making beauty and beauty in the sublime. Like when you want to tell us true things, maybe write an essay, an article, make a movie. Like a painting is better at expressing beauty than it is expressing complex political truths. So like
Maybe it
maybe
could, there's a place for them expressing complex
yeah,
political truths too, but like
yeah.
do some of that, and then I still want the beautiful art. Like it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be everybody going like we're all going to do politics. Like imagine
There is beautiful art
like,
though, just to be clear. Like there is contemporary art that's very beautiful, just because there's
oh
just so
sure,
many
sure.
people on earth. There's a lot of it. But
Absolutely. People will say there's no good music anymore. Bullshit. I'm finding more good. Like I could
yeah,
just go on Spotify and find amazing songs every 10
immediately.
minutes
Yeah.
indefinitely. And they would be produced at a faster rate than I could find them. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
an endless amount of good music now. And we haven't even hit the advent of AI just totally taking over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
And just
you
taking your
realize we're on
entire
the cusp of
Spotify
that.
playlist and being like, oh, you like those patterns? Let's like let's just make
Right.
yeah,
So,
like
there's like I really like Porcupine Tree and Tool and I don't know, Incubus. So
yeah.
if you mix those three and made music based on just those three, I would just be like, give all of it in my brain now.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, exactly.
But that's
Yeah.
we're like when are we? That's like a year from now.
Soon. So yeah, yeah, exactly. Within 5 years,
So,
probably.
so a year, like within 5 years, there will be an infinite amount of the best music you've ever heard,
Yeah.
infinitely being created faster than you could listen to it forever.
Yeah.
And people
And
people
people
are
will
hating.
complain about it. People will say, "Oh, it's like taking away the creativity of the artist," and not appreciate that like we've created this like awe-inspiring font of beauty. Like they won't appreciate.
It does like I am sympathetic to like people will lose jobs and
Yes,
like people
you will.
like so a person. Look, I don't make art, but
Yeah.
if I made music and then you're like, yeah, but I could just push a button and I make 10,000 songs that are better than the one you made. Uh, okay, now my job is pointless, and that's sad. That sucks.
Yeah.
I think that's worth acknowledging, but like also I'm going to listen to the 10,000 amazing songs. Sorry, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I mean, what imagine if we had like Star Trek printers that just print out the best food ever made? Or
Yeah.
sorry, chefs.
Yeah, sorry, chefs. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I'm
sorry, chefs.
really sorry, but like I'm
And,
going
and
to
then
push a
also,
button and
if you're a good chef, you should be able to take the like generated food and then like do interesting things with it that like are like holes in the like what it makes, or maybe it has certain like tendencies that it makes it. And like, oh, if you don't like that tendency of how it makes it, I can do this other thing. Eventually, the chef will be completely replaced, but there will be a transition period where it can still
yeah.
work with the machine and do interesting things. Which, by the way, is what I am doing literally with the AI stuff that I create. That like I create all these like beautiful patterns of I like try to combine like styles and like color palettes in really interesting ways that like you can't just tell the machine make that. You have to like actually say like no, this art style, this color palette, this concept of what to represent, you know what I mean? Like you got to do it. So like I'm still making creative stuff, even though like as a painter, I wouldn't like if I was a painter, I'd lose money on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, but we are going to be entering a scary period because they're already writing essays, they're already
Yep.
coding, they're already doing art. Their videos are just starting now. I just saw a pretty good video today of a cat serving food to people. That was like
Yeah.
obviously AI, but it looked pretty good. And they're getting better and better and better. And I don't know where this stops. Like even if we entirely set aside singularity, AGI, existential threat
Concerns. Yeah.
stuff, we're on the cusp of radically socially transformative technological changes at a minimum,
Absolutely.
like
Absolutely.
of a kind that will make the internet look like nothing.
Yeah. I'm invested in tech companies. I suspect that will make me some money. But yeah.
Are you looking forward to the future, or are you pessimistic, or you don't know?
Oh, I'm so agnostic about what this transition. No time in history has a civilization made a machine intelligence that was much smarter than it. So we just have, we can speculate about how that might go, but like we just have, we're in a very, very epistemically like we have a lot of paucity. I don't know. We have not a lot of information, so we should just be very uncertain about how this is going to go.
Yeah,
Like,
we don't have a historically similar event to go on, do we?
At all. Like, you can say humans becoming the smartest animals on Earth is kind of similar, but even that, we were a biological system that was evolved by natural selection. We weren't a machine whose values were programmed by another intelligent machine. So it's very different, like I mean, it's worth noting that humans, just by being a little bit more intelligent than all the other creatures, just caused mass extinction. That we were that powerful, just from it wasn't just that we were intelligent. We also had language and culture and cooperation.
Yeah,
But
I know humans are not just smart;
and
they're cumulative cultural organisms. I mean, I of all people would support that characterization.
But I mean, it's worth noting. But again, this is a very different situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we cause climate change. I mean, holy crap. Yeah. So, I mean,
if we ran into aliens, do you have priors on how likely it is to go good or bad? Like, they come to us, they're much more, they're 10,000 years more advanced than us. Do you have an intuition?
I don't, because this is totally from the gut. I feel like it'll go well. I just feel like spacefaring civilizations are just not going to be cannibalistic maniacs that just want to eat us all or something like that. I think that I think that they'll be curious. I think they'll be like, "Whoa, we found another alien species." Like, because basically, I'm extrapolating from how I would react and how I think people would react. If we encountered aliens, there would be fear, confusion, anxiety, but mostly, like, what's up with them? What's their deal? Like, what are they like? Because like the first question I would have is, what do they eat? The second question is, what music do they listen to? Those are the first things I'd want to know before almost anything else.
Well, I predict music wouldn't exist with them.
Wait, what?
I would predict that. I mean, the fact that we our ears get stimulated in pleasurable ways by sounds, that seems like less. That seems like more historically contingent than that.
But they might have a music analog, right? They might have a form of entertainment. Like, so, I like the idea of what is it, like squids or that and octopuses that could change the skin, like they have what are they, chromatophore? What are they called?
Yeah,
the things on the skin. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
What if they communicated that way, and so their music was like patterns of color pulses?
Yes,
that'd be cool. So they would be like, check out my color pulses.
And I suspect that we would find it interesting to look at, just because humans tend to like patterned regularity. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And it's impossible to encode that much information without pattern regularity. Like,
but I have no idea. But they might have sports. Like, what kind of sports would they have? Do you think they'd have sports? I do.
Probably. I mean, and if they have a sport, they might even have soccer, because it's just so intuitive.
Yeah, that would be an interesting thing. Like, you're not gonna reinvent chess specifically. That's too weird.
Yeah. But moving a thing on the ground, okay, assuming they have legs and arms, and that's a meaningful distinction, then the idea of kicking a thing towards a thing, that soccer, is pretty,
but they would have something like, it wouldn't be chess rules specifically, like en passant. They're not going to have bishops and rooks, but I could see simulated battles on a grid.
Yeah, because
battles,
because it makes sense to strategize battles. Strategizing battles made sense for them. So why wouldn't they?
Right, and also if you have species where there's I don't know. Well, if they have males and females, they might have one of the other might be more competitive. They might be more combat oriented. They might be more like, ooh. For all my talk of culture, I do think that people have an evolved predisposition to be competitive, to want to fight. Those things are part of our shared evolutionary history, and it wouldn't be that unusual for aliens to have that, and for them to have games. But what kinds of stuff would they not have that we have?
Yeah, so I think like what patterns they find enjoyable will depend so much on like how do they communicate. You know what I mean? And like what wavelengths of light do they see, and like how they communicate. Because like if they're octopi and they're using like patterns on their skin, they're not gonna have music, and they probably will have cool like art that's like skin movement, like skin dance movement. Do you know what I mean? But then they probably wouldn't have like I don't even know. It's a great question, and I think it depends. It will depend so much on how similar they are to us. One thing I think is really weird to think about is the amount of convergent evolution on Earth. There's been like 6 different things that look like dogs. There's been like 100 things that look like worms. There's been like 3 different things that look like rhinos. There's been a kind of a crazy amount of convergent evolution in the biosphere, where it just seems like certain patterns are just good for surviving in our environment. So if an Earth-like planet exists and life forms on that Earth-like planet, it's very likely that there'll be a dolphin-shaped thing and a bird-shaped thing and a worm-shaped thing. Like that's just, it strikes me as incredibly likely. You know what I mean? So this is all conditional on it being an Earth-like planet. If it's on Jupiter, all bets are off. You know what I mean? But it's just kind of amazing the amount of convergence that happens. Pterosaurs go extinct, and then we immediately get birds, and then we get bats. Do you know what I mean? Like,
What do you think is going on with like why haven't we found life out there already?
It's just the universe is a very, 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 very big place, and life is very, 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 very rare. It's like it's hard to get a self-replicating. Like the start of life was probably pretty hard to get. Like I understand that all you need is like an RNA molecule, and it's like shittily copy on another RNA molecule, and it just like really crappily, 10 years later, copy on another RNA. You know what I mean? Like it has to be. It can be really, really bad. And they can get it off the ground. But I still think it's very hard to do that. Though I don't know if I've told you this really cool idea, but given that the Big Bang happened and the universe used to be very hot, and now that it's very cold, there was a time when the entire universe was room temperature for a little while. That's just sort of it follows from the fact that it's now hotter than Earth, and it was hotter than Earth. Now it's colder than Earth. So there was a time in the middle where it was the same temperature as Earth, and I would not surprise me at all if when life formed was just when the entire universe was room temperature. Sorry, the entire universe was room temperature. That's when like life formed, because there was just so many more experiments in Earth-like conditions to occur that the random self-replicating thing could get off the ground.
I'd have a bunch of questions about that. Like it was room temperature, but was it like a big plasma lump, or was there like a bunch of separate, like how much oxygen was there? How much carbon was there? I don't know the answers to those questions.
I'm not totally sure. I think that there was some early stars, but not as many stars. And I think like I don't know any details about it. Apparently, it lasted for millions of years, like apparently like at least 10 million years or something like that. But
was it like? But was it just a bunch of hydrogen? Like
no,
I would want. It wasn't okay.
no. But it wasn't there was not enough time to get enough stellar nucleosynthesis to have as many heavy elements as now. But they still had some stars. At least that's my understanding.
You know what's weird? Yeah, I don't know that much about like cosmology and all this stuff, but why aren't more people interested in it?
I think
It seems a little weird.
Well, it's a little bit like hard to. I don't know. It seems like back in the day, you could like just look at Jupiter and you could like see what Jupiter looks like, and then speculate there's like maybe people on Jupiter. Whereas like now, you have to like I don't know. It's just you take a telescope and you blast it at empty space and have it like, and you just see these like little dots, and then you have to like, do like math to like. Though I did hear recently that there's a good plausible alternative to dark energy, which is just that we thought that the universe was expanding, it was accelerating apart because of the redshift of galaxies, but then they're claiming that the redshift is just caused by the fact that there are dense regions of the universe and not dense regions of the universe, and time moves slower in dense regions than in less dense regions, and then when light goes from less dense regions to denser regions, that causes redshift because of relativistic effects. I don't get relativity. I don't understand Einstein, but it's at least interesting that they have this model of like, oh, it's not. We thought it was accelerating, but it's not. It may just be, which is really cool because that changes our predictions about what the ultimate fate of the universe will be. Because if it's accelerating apart, then heat death is guaranteed. But if it's not accelerating apart, then maybe other options are on the table.
So people think it might not be accelerating?
Yeah.
Whoa. Is that like a credible view, or is it like weird jackpots of tinfoil hats in a corner?
Not. I mean, it's not yet. Doesn't. It's an early hypothesis, but you should. I think it's called like the.
All right. Well, you could look that up, but I need a real quick break. I'll be right back. And we got to wrap this up within the next half hour just because I can't have this take up my whole day. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's fun and I have other stuff I gotta do. All right. I'll be right back in a second. Okay, I'm back.
Hey, bro. So I got an idea that I found interesting. Maybe you'll find interesting about causality. So I love me some counterfactual views of causality. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So let me lay this on you and tell me what you think about it. So there's causality, which is just mere dependency. So this is basically the counterfactual account of causality. And this just means for this to happen, this other thing had to happen. And it's a dependency relationship. If it didn't happen, the other thing wouldn't have happened. And my claim is that this kind of causality usually happens in time, but it doesn't have to happen in time. All this conception is just, does this depend on something else? So if I'm raising my hand and a being in another universe is peering into our universe, it's seeing my hand be raised because I raised it. It's not in our timeline. It's not, it's not after me in time. It's in a totally different timeline, but it's because I raised my hand, like that it sees my hand. Or, if time machines are possible, effects could happen before causes because all that matters is that it depends on it. Or if there was like a perfect 100% predictor that predicts something, like it predicts me raising my hand because I raised my hand. That's like why it's predicting that. I think so. That's like the dependency of account of causality, and it usually is in time, but doesn't depend on time. But then there's this other notion of causality, which is just sort of things that physicists talk about on the micro level that sort of like moves at the speed of light. Like light sort of moves at like the rate in which individual things can like touch each other, which necessarily happens in time. That is just like this direct local interaction that has a certain speed to it. That is not. It's not like structural. It's more just like physical. It's just like, oh, this like and like, this thing. It's not talking about these abstract dependency relationships. And I think these are like two distinct notions of causality. What do you think, buddy?
You might be right. I don't know. I don't think about this that much. What do I say to that?
Okay.
I know we've had we had big debates about counterfactual stuff, and I don't know that I ever fully grokked it. But I have some sense of a being outside of time, and so exempt from the causal relations within a universe. But what is the second notion of causality? The one you said is like the physicist notion.
Just like when an electron hits a proton, and then it like does it like almost like the speed in which the universe renders things happening. Like this thing bumps into that thing, which bumps into that thing, and it's like a very like mechanistic and measurable.
Yeah, I guess that's been I guess sort of my intuitive sense is like this billiard ball-y kind of thing where something acts on something. There's like it's like a the
Yeah.
verb view of causality.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
does that make sense? Like the verb
Yeah.
view, things happen to other things. And I guess what's always been a struggle for me is like a counterfactual view is like it doesn't have that this thing is
Yeah.
hitting that thing kind
Yeah.
of feature.
Yeah.
It's like abstract and logical relate.
Yeah. But
I guess I don't like counterfactuality very much.
well,
It's
what I
just
wanted to say is
personally.
things depend on other things. Like that, this is a
Yeah.
fact about the universe. Some things depend on other things happening. Like you can't have a sword unless you have metal. Like that. Like metal needs to exist for you to have a sword. That depends on that. You know what I mean? Like even if it's not like the same like billiard ball atom hitting atom, it is just a fact that some things depend on other things. You know. So
Yeah.
so I just want like this notion of dependency. I think is like real. It's not just in my head. It's really in the world. Some things really do depend on other things, but
Yep.
it's a slightly
Yeah.
different notion of like at the speed of light, this photon hit this photon, and that's what caused that thing. You know, which I think is also a real thing. It's just not the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
This relates back to like the whole moral realism, anti-realism thing at the start of this discussion. And something I complain a lot about is people claiming that they have a concept, and then I ask them what it means, and they can't tell me. And I don't know if you know Pete Mandic, but he's really cool. He's on Substack. He does comic stuff, so you might like it. He combines philosophy and art. But he responded to that by saying, one because maybe my issue is going too far for some philosophers, but at least one related issue is when philosophers act like they have the concept.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's like, no, I've got the concept of causality. Your concept is the wrong concept. And it's real weird if it's like, hold on. So take take something from like the rationality world, like taboo, the word causality.
Yeah.
Are there's these dependency relations? Do you think those are real? Yes. Do you think there's like counterfactual considerations where if this didn't occur, this wouldn't have occurred? Yes. Okay. That's what I mean by that's all I'm talking about. Call it whatever you want. We don't have to call it causality. Call it schmalzality. Okay. So we've got schmalzality. And then your thing, I don't want to call that causality, the billiard ball thingy. Let's call it physicality or whatever. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that also occurs. So we have the two things occurring. What is up with philosophers getting so caught up on labels and then thinking that like there is a correct essence of the thing, and we have to figure out like what the correct account of causality? It's so strange.
Like, are they just Platonists that think the concepts are real in the universe? Or like, is that what's going on?
It sounds like residual Platonism or something.
Yeah, and like, I mean, I do find it strange that they do that.
It's not just that they do it; they do it with
a lot.
Yeah, with confidence. So this is the last thing I'll ask you about, and then you could say whatever final comments you want to make, and then we could get going. But it's something. I don't know if you ever watch the channel Digital Gnosis with Nathan.
No.
But he made this remark in a stream where he talked about narrative control, and that really it stuck with me, and it's been in my brain like jangling around in there for I don't know a week or two. Whenever I heard it, I don't remember when I heard it. And you could just imagine a counterfactual. Just imagine a really confident group of philosophers that are all like they all privately meet and they all have a really idiosyncratic view of the universe and the way that things work. Like let's say they're all Pythagoreans, right? They think it's all mathematics all the way down. Everything's fundamentally math. And they're like, hey, it seems obvious to me. Does it seem obvious to you? Yeah, it does seem obvious to me. Oh yeah, high five, right? And so they all mutually reinforce their sense this has got to be right. It's got to be right. It's got to be right. And they don't get dissenters in the group like, oh, I don't think it's all math. Like, here's a banana. That's not math. What are you guys talking about? There's nobody there to do that. And maybe there's one dude and they like, dude, get out of here. We don't like you. It's all math. The banana guy's gone. Math. Okay. So you got the math group. And then they start philosophy. And so they just tell everybody it's all math, it's all math, it's all math. And occasionally you get these dissenters. And then eventually other schools of thought emerge that maybe it's not all math, but the all math group still dominates. And they're the founders, they're the heroes of philosophy. And so sometimes people are like, I don't really think it's all math, but it's obvious that it's like the common sense default position. That position could entrench itself. So my point here is that almost any position could, as a matter of historical incident, entrench itself. And proponents of that view could feel very confident in that their views are common sense or obvious and mutually reinforce one another's sense of that. But one of the things that can end up happening is that they can create such an overwhelming sense that their view is the natural, intuitive, reasonable way to think about things that it becomes self-perpetuating. So if someone comes along and goes, I don't really think that way, then thereby in deviating, they are not thinking, they're a weirdo.
Yeah.
But it's a kind of manufactured consensus. And I worry that there are sociological forces like this at play in academia, both within and outside of philosophy, where people are not realizing it's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, where if you go, like, look, it's very easy to say, it's very easy for logical positivism to be dead if everybody keeps going around saying it's dead, it's dead, it's dead. Anybody that sparks up curiosity and you're like, no, don't, it's dead.
It's dead.
Right. So that person might go, oh, I guess it's dead. I'll go do something. I'll go endorse
Mm.
another philosophy, or they'll go, I really like that idea. That's my view of philosophy. So I guess philosophy is not for me. So you could both drive people out or pressure conformity. And then you could go, wow, look at the absence of logical positivists. I mean, imagine if I said, you can't be in my group if you only an idiot would listen to country music or something. They have bad taste in music, and I only surround myself with people that don't like country music. I don't know where I'm going with this example, but then I just conclude, obviously people with good taste don't like country music. Well, yeah, because you kick anybody out that does. What the hell is wrong with you? So philosophers, I feel like they're doing this. I feel
They're
like
doing it, but they're less bad than other fields, to be honest with you. Like, even though they're bad, like whole parts of academia are like very political in a way that's totally unacceptable. And like, I mean, maybe this is less true of like math or something like that, but like, huge parts of the humanities are just completely, people just openly say that they'll like not hire someone if they're a conservative or if they have radically different, values than them. So that's just like, pervasive in academia. In philosophy, yeah, it exists for sure. They have their like, fads and cliques and ideas and stuff like that, but it's less bad. But it's still like, yeah, I mean, they should be open to like people with radically different axioms. Like, I think it would be good if there was more philosophers that came from like Eastern traditions that were like, listen, we're happy to discuss these things with you in a sort of analytic way and use sort of your similar methods, but we have very different starting assumptions. Like, we think that, the universe is Maya. We think that like it's probably the case that consciousness is fundamental, and we're just gonna like that's our prior. Not that we're not necessarily right about it, but we're just gonna start with that, or that someone comes from it would just be good to have people coming from very different traditions, just to shake up the monoculture, because I think that's almost always good. Yeah.
Yeah, like panpsychism is seeing a resurgence. So maybe, there is a sense in which philosophy is more receptive to, you could say, like non-standard views, but it still seems like there's a kind of Overton window of metaphilosophical acceptability. So it's okay to endorse alternative metaphysics, but you better damn well rely on intuitions. And so, when I come along and question the use of intuitions, that's anathema to the whole project. So, it's still like, okay, we're tolerant, but only within these perimeters. It's kind of like if someone's like, look, I'm a Catholic, I'm okay with Protestants, but you better not be, this or that religion. And it's like, well, then you're not really so tolerant, are you?
Yeah.
So I still have that issue with it. So I think you're right. Like, yeah, okay. So a philosophy of all disciplines, like a person could go around being like a solipsist or thinking we're not conscious. And that's like, you're not immediately thrown out for being an insane person. And that might not be true. And like, imagine a biologist is like, there are no dogs, or cells are not real. It's all protoplasm. Like, they're not going to be a biologist for very long. At least I wanted to say, I hope not, but yeah, I guess I would hope not, because that's silly. But yeah, maybe it's like this way in other fields, but I guess I've just been on the receiving end of this so much, a kind of social pressure to conform. And it feels like it's everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think you're a pretty nonconformist guy, so I think you'll be able to withstand the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. But I think that, like, yeah, it sucks that people are, so committed to intuitions being the only sort of way that like philosophy can go. I understand that, like, sometimes what you're accusing them of is being silly. Like, you think all these intuitions have epistemic weight. They don't. So your whole thing you're doing is dumb. Like, there is a sense in which, like, there's a bit of a challenge to saying, like, your whole fucking process makes no sense. And yeah, sometimes you should say that to people, but I can understand why someone might be defensive of their methodology that they thought was good. You know what I mean? Like, if they like,
Yeah.
Like, if you came along and were like, hey, astronomers, your telescopes, like, sometimes telescopes work, but like 80% of the time, telescopes aren't telling you what you think to tell them. The astronomers are gonna be like, fuck you, bitch.
It's mostly dust on the lens. That's not stars, you idiots.
Like, there's some stars there, but like, it's mostly dust, buddy. Like They wouldn't love it. Like,
No, I guess not.
yeah,
Yeah, but I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. But you have some non-conformity tendencies too.
that's true.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Maybe that's why we get along.
indeed. Well, this was a great conversation, buddy. This was I really enjoyed talking to you and debating with you, and we should do this again sometime.
Yeah, I don't really feel like we debated that much. It's an interesting thing, which is good. People can disagree without it seeming like a fight,
Yeah,
and I feel
Yeah.
like there are disagreements here, but neither of us feels motivated to like hold the other's feet to the fire.
yeah,
And there's a time and place where I think that's valuable, but there's also a time and place where just talking
yeah.
can
What's
be
your view?
valuable.
Let's explore your view. Let's find out what it is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So do you have anything else you want to like? Should I guess I could say to everybody, like the video, subscribe, but also check the description because I'll throw some links in there for your stuff, which I'll get from you afterwards. We'll get some links for people to check out your stuff.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say?
No, I don't think I have anything to say. I think this was really
Cool.
good.
Okay.
And I hope we talk more sometime.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do it again. And I'm going to play the outro video. So everybody, I will see you all in the next video too. All right. Take care, everybody.